Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Menasha Common Council meeting to order. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, now that I'm out of breath.
Could we have the roll call, please?
Alderman Kraut-Kramer.
Here.
Alderman Keehan.
Here.
Alderman Zielinski.
Here.
Alderman Spencer.
Here.
Alderman Benner.
Here.
Alderman Nichols and Taylor have been excused.
The first item on the agenda is people from the gallery to be heard on matters pertaining to the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the police department budget. We have Chief Steika here. If you'd like to take it away.
Sounds good. Good evening. For those that haven't sat in on our budget presentations in the past, what we generally do is, yes, we do dress up a little bit for it because we kind of take this as the opportunity as sort of our state of the department address that we give the council. So we give kind of a synopsis as to what's happened over the last year and what we're planning for the following year, and then going over things with our budget. So in our 2015 year in review, we certainly would be remiss if we didn't address the issues with the Trestle Trail shooting. Obviously, that was a tragedy for the community, and there's a lot of lessons that can be taken out of it. One of the things, though, I think for the city to kind of step back and look at is how did the police department function? Through ourselves and the partners and the partnerships that we have with the other agencies in the area, by and large, things went about as well as they humanly possibly could. We certainly haven't talked a lot about it in these chambers, but there's a lot of information and a lot of things that certainly went to plan. The training that the city has invested in with the officers, your willingness to play nice and work with our neighbors to make sure that we can enter into agreements and make sure we have the resources available and vice versa. So there's a lot of things I think that the council has supported which really set us up for success in dealing with a horrific situation. So we certainly appreciate the support that we had received leading up to that event so we could be successful. On to the better news though. The community outreach efforts, obviously that's something that we as a department very much value. We know that that's important to you as the elected officials in the community. Some of the highlights that we're sharing up there or highlighting for this year is the partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. The Boys and Girls Club came to town. The executive director for this branch was and is very much really trying to embrace making sure that we have a relationship with the kids at their facility. Understanding that some of those children may come from households where they only see law enforcement in perhaps a negative fashion, where we can engage them in a more positive role, it's certainly a win-win for the children as they're growing up. We did a abbreviated type of youth academy with the kids this summer. We make some unannounced visits so they see us, and it's just when a uniform officer shows up, it's not who's in trouble, but hopefully that they get to know the officers as human beings. And currently we're doing sort of a more informal type of thing with Aaron Zemlock, who goes over there once a week, spends about a half hour to an hour. The last session was on ask a cop a question kind of a thing, and next week he's doing a historical type of thing of Menasha where he's gone around and taken pictures before, and it's kind of a quiz game. So we're trying to get things that aren't necessarily law enforcement related to build those relationships. We continue our presence on social media with Facebook. It's a way that we as a city are able to push a lot of information out, as well as the police department. We continued with the annual report that we publish now every year to kind of give the community an idea as to what we're doing. The Racine Street Traffic Project, if you recall, we did try to do a heavier enforcement, especially in the area north of 3rd Street and south of 9th Street because of the Boys and Girls Club, the renovations to the high school, and trying to slow that traffic down. We've seen some successes in that. We're still working with Public Works and the mayor and community development to see if there's some roadway changes that we could potentially do next year or in subsequent years to try to decrease the traffic further. One little number that I thought was kind of interesting, because the enforcement didn't start until the beginning part of the summer, I just looked at the crash data from August 1st to November 1st of this year versus last year. And on Racine Street last year, we had 26 crashes versus 22 this year, so slight decrease. What was very interesting, though, is where those crashes took place. This year, 12 of the 22 took place south of 3rd Street, the majority of them being Broad Street, Main Street, and Racine Street Bridge. So I know there's been some discussions as far as the Racine Street Bridge and how it's configured and Broad Street intersection. If you think about it, in the last 3 months, we've had 12 of the 22 crashes on all of Racine Street just there, versus only 7 the year before of 26. So the other thing that we had is the drug drop box. If you remember, we got a grant on that. We started that program up, realizing that we needed to have a central location for people to get rid of unused and unwanted medication. We've been doing a lot of talk internally as well as with the police commission about the study that was done of policing in the 21st century. That was the study that the Obama administration commissioned to kind of give a gauge and a litmus test as far as how your police department's functioning. A lot of the stuff has been kind of a fun affirmation because it's things that we've already been doing. There's certainly some things that we can look at as far as expanding how we can meet the needs of the community going forward. We spent some time this year doing our police support training. So that's our records folks, our Comtext ones that answer the phone, realizing that they are the face of the police department to many citizens, those that come in to pay a parking ticket, those that call the non-emergency number. And we want to make sure that they are presenting the image and dealing with the community in the way that we really expect them to. Something that really hasn't been done in the past. We started doing it the previous year, and then we brought it to another level, kind of working more with teamwork and trying to get everyone together on stuff. Very happy to report that we are fully staffed for the first time in a decade. Certainly something that has been a challenge, especially in the hiring challenges that are going on across the board. We started a peer support program. That is something that's county-wide, which provides officers another peer. So if they're having issues, be it at home, be it at work, it's someone else that they can reach out to, because we know that in law enforcement, sometimes folks will not reach out for the assistance that we need. That peer support program certainly came into some benefit after the Trestle Trail shooting. Some of the things that our officers have seen and had to deal with, they certainly needed someone to talk to after that. We are busier though. Part of it, I think, is because we have a newer department and they initiate more things on their own, and part of it is just the way that it worked this summer. But year to date, as of November 1st, we had 12,100 calls for service, including self-initiated field activities, which is an increase of almost 10%. And we continue to try to find additional sources for funding, and we received over $25,000 in grants for this last year. So what are we going to do next year? Well, we want to maintain the full staffing. We do know that we're going to have Ron Bouchard, who's been with us for quite some time. He's indicated that he's finally going to leave us, so we'll certainly miss him. And there's a couple other officers that are eligible for retirement. Whether or not they retire will be up to them as the year goes on. We're going to continue the management officer training, part of it which is mandated by the state. Part of it, as you can see with our training budget, we need to maintain that as we have a younger department, and there's some mandatory trainings as well as things that they need to have to be proficient in their job. The procedural justice training, we've talked about that in the past. That is kind of we've been embracing it for the last couple of years, but if you Google a search on procedural justice, you'll see that's the latest hot topic that's going on law enforcement wise. It's in essence making sure that law enforcement, and not just law enforcement, but the whole criminal justice system is dealing with people with courtesy and respect. There's a way to give someone a traffic ticket and have them shake your hand at it. And there's a way that you can give a traffic ticket and the person drives away thinking that they're the biggest jerk in the world. We strive for the first, and that's kind of like procedural justice stuff. And it's also internalizing it too, making sure that we're treating our own folks with that courtesy and respect. Continue relationships with rental property owners. We've done that with the e-alert system, so landlords can sign up and know that if we're over at their properties, that they're aware of that and can hopefully work with us to address issues of bad tenants. We're going to keep working on the Racine Street corridor stuff that we talked about. One of the things that we're looking at is continuing to strengthen ties with the minority population in the community. And what's the last one? developing a plan to work on solutions of building issues, and that's something that we'll talk about with the capital improvement item that we have in the budget. So when we look at the 2015 budget estimate, if I looked at your worksheet, the way that mine work, I can just print out the ones specifically for the police department, and if you would add up the columns, first time ever, and I'm not proud of it, we always show quite a bit of dollars that we are under budget, and that sometimes is brought question in the council. This year, as of right now, we're actually showing a $24,000, almost $25,000 deficit. Don't worry, it's okay, because that deficit is, if you remember, we had 2 squad cars that had some issues this year. So while we're showing a deficit of $24,000 on paper, it doesn't reflect the fact that there's a $34,000 check on the opposite side paying for that shortage. So we're not under budget. We'll actually come in probably $20,000 under budget is what I would guess when everything is said and done. So for our 2016 budget, what are we looking at? We're looking at a 1.7% increase when you don't factor in the CIP projects. When you do factor in the 2 CIP projects that we have, technically there's the third of the vehicle ones, generally speaking the 2 new ones that we have on there, then it goes up to 3.2%. So looking at what we have in there, so in the first section, the 0801 portion of our budget, that's the main police department budget itself. What Peggy did with myself is we basically look at all the employees, we plug them into what steps they're going to be in, and we come up with a number. In order to make the number for the budget this year, the number that the computer spit out is been reduced now by 15,000, and that's based upon what we believe will be at least one of the retirements of Ron Bouchard and then someone else being hired in at a lower rate. So we believe that we can make that. The next one that was cut from the initial one that we had on there was the vehicle budget was cut 20,000. So what we'll in essence do is we plan on purchasing 2 vehicles then for next year, and really we'll have a slight carryover that we'd be able to do. If you recall, what we were trying to do is keep a consistent amount for vehicles, so we wouldn't have one year that it goes up 35,000 by buying one. We just wanted to keep kind of a similar number year after year after year, do a carryover on the off years, so then when we do have a vehicle year that we buy 3 versus 2 vehicles, we'd have that money. If you notice the 1504 account, the retirement account is down. That is just because the dollars and cents that the state is requiring us to pay has been decreased. Our IT expenses and the city's IT expenses overall that Director Stino will tell you about with the IT part of it is down for us as well at the PD. Then one other one, obviously, if you've been to the gas station recently, you know that we're paying less for fuel, so we certainly want to reflect a lower fuel cost for next year for our fleet. The only thing that I do caution with the vehicle cut is, while it shouldn't be an issue for this year, if you recall, we got into the position when financial times were really tough. We were holding on to cars much longer than we probably should have. I'm glad to report not only are we fully staffed, but we also got rid of the last car that we were told by City Garage not to drive out of the city because it was that concerning that it might not make it back into the city. So we've actually had a couple neat things go on this year. The next one is the crossing guard budget. The dollars are going to be the exact same as from last year. There's been a number of tweaks that we've been able to do as far as shortening up some times and positions that we've eliminated over the years. What we're proposing as part of the budget is that the hourly rate that we pay the crossing guards, we want to bump up from $7.90 an hour to $8.50 an hour. It has about a $1,500 impact. It's not going to impact the amount, like I said, that we budgeted for 15 will be the same for 16, but because of the reduction of time and hours and where it's at, it will have no impact on the city. The reason why we're doing this is we're having one heck of a time getting crossing guards. If you recall in the past, when we did the wage study, we were the only one paying minimum wage, and most other municipalities were paying anywhere from $2 to $5 an hour more for crossing guards. We explained, well, really not an issue because we had a lot of people doing it, kind of a labor of love of the position, and some of those folks have moved on. One actually passed away last year, so now we're trying to make that a little bit more of an incentive. Currently, we have one out on sort of long-term disability, not job-related, and we've actually had to call in, and we've gotten a volunteer from our auxiliary unit to come in and fill in for that crossing guard duty. So we're kind of scrambling to do as much as we can. We don't have one of those. It's going to turn to Joe, a CSO, or an officer to do it, and obviously there's a lot more cost involved with many of those options. So speaking of Joe and the CSO program, we did a little bit of a change this year. We did split out from the CSO budget the code enforcement position. A variety of reasons behind that. So now just the CSO program is contained in the 0803 account, and Joe's now been branched out to the 0811 account. What we, keeping with the CSO account first, said a slight increase in wages. By wages, I don't mean the hourly rate. I mean the amount of hours that we pay the CSO. We're having 3 of our 4 CSOs. They generally stay in that position until they graduate from school. And 3 of the 4 of them, as luck would have it, are graduating this December. So the majority of them are going to be moving along, which is going to leave the remaining CSO as well as potentially Joe to help out with the training. So we did slightly increase the wages for that program to basically allocate more hours to the remaining CSO so she can help train the new ones as they get hired in. Then on the other portion of Joe's, why did we split Joe out? Well, I know there's been a lot of discussion amongst council members as far as what are we doing with Joe's position, where is he at, where are we going to, should he be more in line with building inspections and community development. We thought by breaking him out this way, it gives a little bit better of a snapshot for you. So as you move forward, you know what that program kind of carries as far as a price tag and how that can then mesh into community development or a combination of what we're doing now. But we figured that there was more transparency. Initially, when Joe's position was created, gosh, what, 10 years ago at least, the thought was that Joe was going to be a glorified CSO for all practical purposes, and the extent of his knowledge or what he would be doing would be junk vehicles and long grass and other real obvious things. Joe's obviously taken on more responsibilities than what that initial position was looked at, so that's why we decided to further branch it out, just because he does a lot more than what a CSO would do. The other thing that we did with Joe's position is when we broke him out, we also did a pay analysis of his position. We were able to find that there are 5 other municipalities that have a designated code enforcement position in the state. We were able to get that information from the association that Joe belongs to. Now, all of these positions don't necessarily correlate 100% to what we do. Shorewood, Superior, Janesville are probably closer to what we do. Village of Hales Corner, for example, is a lot less than what we do. That position is actually also a deputy clerk, and Joe could be your number 2, Debbie. And then the inspection side of it, they call that person an inspection assistant who helps out the building inspector. So that's certainly a different caliber. Then on the high end of it, the village of the city of Superior, that actually is more of a building inspector, and they call it like a building inspector 2/code enforcement. So that one actually has more authority as far as writing out the orders and whatnot. So in looking at that, we ended up finding that taking all of them together, realizing one was higher, one was lower, found out that the average starting rate was $21.54, the max was $26.08. What we are currently at for a starting salary for Joe's position is $17.19, maxing out at $21.48. Realizing that's a bit below what we were able to find as comparables, we did build into the budget an increase of $1.50 an hour for Joe, which comes at a cost of about $3,100 per year. Jail and animal shelter. Notice the jail fees. We have been successful, and the courts have been successful as far as having other avenues for people to pay their fines instead of just having jail time. So we're seeing less people staying in jail. Plus, I think with the upturn of the economy, more people are paying their fines. Therefore, they're not getting incarcerated, which we have to pay for. And then under the animal fees, we're showing another $1,000 decrease. If you remember the animal fees, They're actually based upon, 2016 is based upon 2014's numbers. They go a couple years back because we're not done for 2015. We don't know how many animals we've collected for 2015, but we do know for 2014. That's just the way the shelter does it. So next year for 2017, it'll be the 2015 numbers. If you recall, we did do some things a little bit differently for the 2015 as far as limiting the amount of traps that we put out, and those that catch a cat or an animal within their own trap, we no longer pick up. We had a number of instances where there's concerns about the traps getting lost, damage, and who's responsible for it. We would be if we take possession of those traps. In addition, there were a number of folks that got scratched and or bit by these animals. So instead of messing with the traps at all, people can certainly still bring their caught cat in their trap to the animal shelter. It's just we don't pick it up. The other thing that we do is during the regular business hours when we have Joe, our CSO, working, we're having our folks transport the animals directly to the shelter instead of the shelter coming to us, which obviously costs more. So we're hoping to see that decrease further as we're going forward. All right, so what do we have in the capital expense for next year? First thing is the parking ticket system that we have. It was purchased over 15 years ago. These are pictures of the handheld models themselves. You can kind of make out that they have a DOS type liquid crystal screen on them. If you also notice, one kind of has a gray printer, the other one has a blue printer. They haven't made these machines in, I believe, 5 or 6 years. We have been pilfering every machine that we could find off of eBay for the last couple of years just to try to keep a couple of units functioning. To say that the system is antiquated and out of date is quite the understatement. I should note too that the parking program itself, or parking enforcement within the city, does generally take in approximately a little over $50,000 a year. So when we're looking at replacing the system, we initially had estimates of over $100,000, but we were able to find some solutions that I think would certainly meet the city's needs for under 50. This is kind of a picture of the Power Park screen itself. You can kind of make out from there. Again, it's antiquated. The white boxes are the only ways that a plate or a vehicle could be searched by. It's very cumbersome and it isn't very user-friendly. The new systems that we're looking at not only have the capabilities that this one has as far as tracking them, sending out letters to folks when they don't pay their traffic tickets, but the new systems that would be under that $50,000 mark would also have the ability for online appeal as well as online payments for their traffic tickets. So those are two of the things that we've certainly gotten feedback from those that get parking tickets that they'd like to see. The building. What we've included in here as well is a building study. The building was built in 1978. The last study that was done, which was facilities across the board in the city, was in 2002. So I kind of looked back and thought, what's changed since the time the building was built? Well, in 1980, E911 was finally introduced. So that's when you called 911 and the place that you made that call to would know where you were calling from. In 1990, we switched from revolvers to semi-automatic handguns. So if you think the old revolver from early TV shows, we got rid of that since the building's been open. Pepper spray came on board in 1992. First computer in the department, 1993. And then we also had the MDTs in the car. My wristwatch had about as much memory capability as what the original computers we had in the car. It was kind of cool because when you turned them on, it would actually like rack up how many K were in there, and I think it was under 1,000. So first computers in the car in 93, none in the building, certainly no internet. 1996, so almost 20 years ago, DNA was finally accepted, or was finally accepted as evidence. On the other side of things, household income was about 15 grand. Stamp went from 13 cents to 15 cents. Gallon of gas was only 63 cents. The Dow Jones was at 893 points, not even at 1,000. So internally at the police department, what didn't we have? We didn't have female officers back then. There was no plans, and we had to add, there was a very small locker room which wasn't originally intended, but we have since built them a locker room, because there were female officers back at that time. We also had the dispatch center down in the basement. So now all of our 911 calls are routed down to Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. We have a joint dispatch center down there. We actually had the dispatchers on the north end of the county in that facility. The evidence storage requirements that Ron can attest to have just changed insurmountably. We have to hold every piece of evidence now through the exhaustion of basically everyone's appeal process if they were convicted of a crime. The equipment that's needed now for an officer is substantially different. We obviously have to have some place to store and maintain the equipment that we don't carry. Fire department operations have also changed out of the facility since then. Even since the building study was done in 2002, back in 2002, we didn't have a joint fire department. So now you think that before the fire department joint had both operations for the police and the fire department, and now the fire department, while they do a lot of their maintenance and some training out of the facility now, they certainly don't have the administrative offices. So is the building, as far as the city, being utilized in the best way possible? I guess it's something to look at. The design of the building itself really wasn't used or designed to incorporate collaboration. Police department back in 1978, you had your stupid patrol officers, your investigators, and I say stupid patrol officers because that's what they were looked at by other people in the department. You were a dumb cop until you got to the level of an investigator. And that's why, if you've been through our building, there's a door between patrol and where investigations was. In fact, if you kind of look back in the records area, there was a drop-down desk and there was a door to records to keep the dumb police officers out of the records area. They weren't allowed to be back there. Things have changed, obviously, substantially over time. And now, you know, investigators are routinely cooperating with police officers and there's a mutual respect, and things are just so different. But when the building was set up, it was certainly set up for a different type of culture. We also have requirements with recorded interviews now. It's mandated that certain offenses have to be recorded for the court. Lockup has changed. There used to be the thing that if you filled up all the jail cells on the weekend, the shift commander would have to buy dinner. The odds of doing that now are very slim because we used to lock people up for traffic offenses and being like an operating after revocation. Now we don't do that anymore. There's certain criteria that if it's met, the person's just released. The lobby area. You think about some of the things that folks are coming in now, where can we meet with a person? And many of you have seen that picking up council packets. Here you have this person, you know, crying their eyes out because of X, Y, or Z that just happened, and they're in the middle of this public area. We don't have any place, nor was there a place ever designed in that building to meet in a non-secure but private place. The concept or idea of a community room, that doesn't exist in our department, and if you look at any other police department, community rooms are certainly something that's very commonplace now. All right, so that's what's gone on. What else has gone on in the since 1978? Well, I couldn't get the crime data back from 1978, so we went to 1985. And what I find very interesting is the top line there is all the property crime combined together. And then you can't really even see it, but the violent crime rate is the really low bottom line. So what's really neat, if you've ever wondered and you've heard the stories or the things that crime is down nationally, is it here? Our population's changed. Our population's changed a lot. When the first numbers of the 1985, we had 14,751 people. Population's increased 18%, but yet the crime's gone down. Brett and I were joking earlier that if you notice the big drop in property crime is about 95-ish, that's when we got hired, so. This is the same thing, but what I just did is I took out the top two just so it wasn't skewed as much so you could see the violent crime. And this is, again, very typical of what we're seeing in the country. But when you look at it as a long snapshot, so some of the more, I hate to use the word petty crime, but the property crime tends to be a little bit more of a petty crime. What has become more complex over the last 15 years has been more the violent crimes. They obviously take a lot more resources, a lot more time to investigate. And again, building being set up for a different type of mission than what it is now. What I also find interesting on this graph too is you'll see when the economy was getting worse that some of those crime rates were a little bit higher, and as the economy has tended to improve over time, they're going down. And I actually pulled these numbers for Nina and the town of Menasha and a couple of other municipalities. And it's really weird how they're almost identical. The numbers themselves are a little bit different based upon the jurisdiction, but the lines themselves are very, very similar. We see an uptick. The only thing that we're seeing an uptick on is burglaries. Why is that? The drug problem. And we see that here in our community as well. Now, burglary could be something as simple as a person leaving a door open and having medication sitting on their counter. Someone goes in, grabs those meds, walks out with it. That certainly could be one. It can also be to businesses, and there are businesses that will get burglarized more because when a person needs their fix, they'll do whatever. But on the plus side of things, the violent crime certainly has gone down. So the building condition itself, just want to walk you through some of these things. The building itself is unfortunately getting to the point that it's frankly somewhat embarrassing to bring people through on building tours. When they start looking around, this is one of the feedback that, as we talked about last year with prospective officers coming through, when they walk through the building, they have chosen to go to other places because they believe that the building is indicative of the way the police department operates. Now, the things that I'm going to show you, we certainly could fix a bunch of them, but in talking with Adam about it and people internally at our place, we could fix some lights, we could put in some new ceiling tiles and kind of leave everything as is, but if the building itself isn't necessarily meeting the long-term goals, why should we drop, pick a number, $5,000 on ceiling tiles just when we realize maybe 3 years, 5 years down the road, we're going to be changing the configuration of this hallway. We don't want to be throwing good money after bad, so to speak. Looking at this down the hallway, if you've been in the building, we leave most of the lights off because we'd be wasting energy otherwise. So it just kind of looks really strange that you have the majority of your lights down the hallways being turned off. Same thing down in the basement. So you can see there's only a couple that generally get illuminated. This is looking into the lobby, from the lobby area into the Comtech area. Just pictures of the walls and how they're falling apart with plaster. Again, could we replaster the walls and paint? We certainly could. However, if that area needs to be reconfigured, we want to kind of take a broader look at it and do it right one time instead of patchworking things as we're going along. So where the copier is, copier's put on some nice 2x4s because the copier itself doesn't function very well. And every time we have another issue with it, the copier repairman's solution is throw another thing of plywood underneath and maybe that'll fix it. Talking about ceiling tiles, just kind of rifle through these, kind of see that they're in hurting shape. Even things like the stairways, losing paint and mismatched treads. Some of our workstation areas, you can see sort of again, 1978, we had 0 computers. Now, if you've been in the building and you go by the Comtech area, you see they got, looks like HAL 2000 sitting there with 42 screens and buttons and gadgets and gizmos everywhere. The building wasn't necessarily designed for that. This is the men's shower. Personally, a couple times I've used it, but let's say it's one of the quickest showers you'll ever take in your life. And then we talked about the evidence storage area, how it's exploding. In fact, after the Trestle Trail incident, we couldn't even store the evidence. We had to rely on our partners in Nina and the town of Menasha to hold on to a bunch of stuff for us until we kind of configure things in this place. So as I said, the idea behind that concept is to pay for a study, someone to come in, give us some ideas, sit down, see how the building is currently being utilized, and have a good plan going forward instead of just trying to piecemeal things as we're going along and keeping it exactly as is. With that, that's what I have. Questions?
Alderman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Getting back to the evidence room, what does the state or federal government require of us as a community to store evidence? And are we complying with that?
Ron, if we could have you come up.
Ron is in charge of the evidence room, so while I can give you an overview answer, he can give you a much better.
I would say we are complying with it, yes. There's no problem with that. We have some mandates that have been set forth, and it's regarding DNA. We're required to keep evidence that has potential DNA in as pristine as condition as we can until that individual serves his entire sentence, and that includes incarceration time as well as extended supervision. We currently have evidence back there from a serial rapist from back in the early 2000s. He had over 120-year sentence. I believe he's probably in his 40s right now. Who knows how long we're going to have to keep that in evidence. The big problem right now is just finding storage space. We have shelving, we have containers. The room itself was set up years ago to be a garage. We've secured the overhead garage door so there's no access from the outside. We do occasionally have problems with the climate control in there. I know I have building maintenance in usually every fall when the weather changes, and then in the spring again, so we can control the climate to fit the season. So, but as far as meeting the minimum requirements, we are doing that. No problem.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Just a follow-up question. Given the growing inventory of evidence, do you foresee a point in the future where we would no longer be able to comply with the requirements?
No, I don't see that. We'll always find a way to store the evidence. I've been doing this for such a long time. It's funny because it's so easy for us to take evidence in. The officers do a very good job at that, identifying potential evidence and what may be needed to use in court. The big problem is purging the property, getting rid of it. There's so many factors that decide as to when and how we're going to get rid of evidence. And we try to stay on top of that as best we can. Sometimes it's difficult because we get pulled away from the evidence room to do other things. So it's kind of a part-time job for us. I see a lot of agencies making that, rather than a sworn officer, making it a civilian position with one or more civilians working in conjunction with a sworn officer, supervisor, where they can dedicate more time to that function. I guess looking into the future, that might be something that the city may want to look at as far as staying on top of the evidence room.
Anyone have questions for the chief or anyone else? Alderman Better?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Has anybody done a space study on our facility at this point, or we have a mindset as to whether we would be looking at potential addition or just a remodel?
That's what this would look at. The last study that looked at the facilities across the board was that 2002 study, which is still posted on the city internet. And because things have changed in it, that's kind of the overall perspective. Evidence obviously being one of the largest areas that we need to look at, but and I guess my vision for it is realizing that the city to come up with, pick a number, $750 million to redo a building isn't going to happen anytime soon. So what we look at is what can we do modularly, potentially, at a cheaper cost that would kind of coincide, almost like a Lego block approach. So if there is a solution to reconfiguring or adding on to an evidence area that would cost $100,000, maybe that's something that would be priority one that can be done in such and such year. And then that next area that could be addressed for whatever dollar amount would be, a future year, and kind of doing it from that approach instead of looking at a whole global thing or piecemeal.
Yeah. Ultimately, when you do something like that, it ends up costing you more money in the long run to do a little here and a little there than what it is just to bite the bullet and do what we actually need. We're into that building for 37 years, and typically in this environment, about 35 years is about where you're at. for the building as far as before it needs to be remodeled and things need to be done. So we're certainly overdue, and if we're gonna spend 3 more years looking at it, trying to figure it out, every year you don't do something, the more it costs also. The costs go up higher. So if there's something we need to do, I think it's something that we need to take seriously and start to figure out. So appreciate you bringing us up to date on that. Thank you.
Alderman Zelensky.
Thank you. There was a question about the court system where they were running a deficit. And one of the answers I think Pam gave, the Menasha department's writing more tickets and citations than Nina. And now you tell me that the graph is basically the same. So what was the issue with we're writing too many tickets and not getting payback or something on them?
Yeah, the graph that I showed are all crimes, so misdemeanors and felonies. When you write a traffic ticket, it's referred to as a civil forfeiture. Those numbers aren't included in those graphs in any way, shape, or form. So traffic tickets that would go through municipal court are basically a fine, and those don't get represented by your crime statistics. The ones that I showed there are the numbers that are actually reported to the FBI and compiled so you can look at one agency versus another, one area of the country versus another.
So something broke with the court system on Menasha's side, because if it's running a deficit, and we're gonna have to be looking into that in the next few years, I heard.
From the Menasha side of things, no, we've actually stayed very consistent in our traffic numbers since the inception of the court. There's certain limitations with the court as far as what they're allowed to charge, and that was successfully changed. I'm sure Pam had mentioned that to you a couple of years ago, where they could increase bond amount. I think when the original study was done, it was potentially flawed as to how much of an income there would actually have been. There's other things with the courts that like I say, it's beyond the scope of the police department, but as far as the numbers themselves, we've maintained pretty much where we've been at from the study all the way through to where we are now, which fluctuates between roughly 16 to 1,800 traffic citations that go through the court a year.
And back to the building, most of the dates you had up there, we basically didn't even have an east side of the town, or the city. At some point, should we be thinking about relocating the police station for response time for the east side? Because it's only gonna get busier over there.
You certainly could. Obviously, that's a much higher cost than
Well, I know remodeling and building new.
Well, that's true too. See, the thing that's somewhat interesting of it is, if you look, we are one of the last remaining police departments that hasn't been reconfigured or redone in northeast Wisconsin. Metro is probably the other one. Their building is close in age, I believe, to ours. But you look at the town of Menasha, they obviously chose to go to the west side. Nina built on the south side of Nina. Appleton did a refurb of theirs. Grand Chute built outside. So you kind of have a mix. I guess that's something that we haven't really discussed, because I don't know. I guess that would be another interesting thing to pose to a consultant that would come in to really look at, are we best suiting the needs?
Because we're talking about a new city garage. Maybe some of the stuff could be incorporated into that. And I didn't know if you needed a satellite station on the other side, or...
Certainly don't need a satellite station. Our numbers just don't justify it. It just doesn't warrant it. You have to kind of look at where your calls for service are as well, and we're somewhat centrally located for where the majority of our calls for service are. I think when we looked at it kind of holistically a couple of years ago, the actual location of City Garage, or across from where City Garage is at, is a pretty decent location as well. But again, that was more of a conceptual thing that we did a number of years ago.
Mm-hmm. And where are you getting most of the calls, in the older part of town or the newer part? Or the newer parts usually are a lot less?
Correct. The majority of your, well,
but we're getting older apartments out on the east side too, and
what's our UCR guy or crime?
Typically, when you've got the newer areas, we're going to have less crime out there. They've got better security systems. The houses are further apart. It's when vehicles are in there, they're more suspicious, so people call on them. So it's not a place where a lot of people are going to go to commit crimes. But down in the downtown area, in the older neighborhoods, more of the rental areas, that's where we have more of our calls for service.
Yeah, but being a landlord myself, the rental properties are spread out throughout this whole city. You don't know if the single family house is owner occupied or a rental at that time. You don't really get notified on that basis, because some people are just, they move and they rent their house out, new, old, or whatever. I know we're congested in this part of the town, or this part of the city. What do we tell people with this budget going forward? I get some calls once in a while that the response isn't fast enough for them in the city. Now that we're fully staffed, does that help?
No, is the short answer. The short answer, no, being the fact that we had to maintain our minimums through all the times that we were down staff. So that was either by juggling schedule, by overtime, whatever the case may have been. So by and large, I guess my no with my asterisk is, if it happens to be a time that person calls that we now have an extra officer on because we don't have someone out at training or on vacation or what have you, yes, in theory, the more amount of work that you have divided by more people working, it should take care of it quicker. The bigger thing that when we get those inquiries, I actually like getting them myself. So if you get them, certainly let me know, because there's certainly something that's going to be prioritized. And there's this misconception that by calling the police, you're going to instantly have a police officer at your door. There are certain things that it may take a moment to, the officer is going to clear up finishing this report before they go jump on to the next thing. If it's an after the fact theft complaint that their lawn ornament got taken yesterday afternoon, we're not necessarily going to have an officer scream. Well, they're certainly not going to be screaming over there, but they're going to get there when they get there. Certainly being respectful to the person's time. We're not going to make it like Time Warner that, give them a 4-hour window and show up at the end of it. We certainly strive to get someone there as quickly as possible, but the priority calls are certainly going to go to the disturbances, the traffic crashes, the things that we have to have an officer there too. A lot of times when we get those calls, we actually kind of look up and see how long the response time was, and generally speaking, it's less than 10 minutes when I've had those complaints in the past. So we tend to get to the calls pretty darn quick. And in fact, the instruction that we have with the supervisors is that people should be clearing up from task A, B, or C if it's a non-essential complaint or non-essential task that they're working on, to make sure that we're doing that. The other thing that we do is, if there's going to be a delay because of it and they've called the non-emergency number, the ComTechs are aware of that, and they'll generally tell the citizen when they call, hey, just so you know, we're a shift change, it might be a little bit, they're working on a traffic crash, so it might be a little bit for those calls. So hopefully I've been improving that communication as well, if it is taking a little bit longer.
What's happening with the Neighborhood Watch program? Because I remember years ago, I seen these signs all over the city, because they're basically disappearing and were non-existent. Did they change the program, or you'd see be wary here, people are watching, there's a Neighborhood Watch area, and now I don't see those signs out anymore.
Yep, and that's certainly something that's kind of changed societal-wise. Neighborhood Watch programs still do start up, but what the police department's role in it, not just here, but wherever they're created, is we provide the tools and the resources for them to start one. And if it's a matter of coming in once a year and hearing how's it going there or whatever upon request, we'll do that. So it really kind of takes that neighborhood initiative to start one and continue one going. With the way that, not just here, but in general, people tend to be a little bit more by themselves. They don't reach out to their neighbors. How many times have you heard that, I don't even know the guy that lives across the street from me? Those types of things are what has negatively impacted a community watch.
That's who the neighborhood is watching.
Yeah, exactly. Then there are some neighborhoods that do that informally now. There are also some neighborhoods that have formed their own Facebook or social media type of groups where they're communicating with one another via the internet. So now they're not doing it with the police involved, which ideally is what we want them to do. Mm-hmm. Not that we don't want to be involved in it, but really it comes from, they know what's different. They know when that red car is not normally on the street. They know when someone moves in and all of a sudden there's this activity. So to be able to them to have that confidence that they're able to then call and bring us in when it becomes a bigger problem. That's the ideal. So conceptually, the whole thing has changed. And, you know, years ago when George Porter was a part of it, he certainly had a lot of pride in the fact that we had 40 different community watch programs. But as that's all kind of moved along, or that people have been more self-sufficient in it, that the program itself has still changed. That being said, there are still groups that are still active, and Aaron Zumlock does go out and still works with those groups. In fact, last week he was at a new one that was starting up.
You know, I'm sure Facebook changed a lot of this stuff, because if there's something going on in the neighborhood,
Oh yeah.
I'm not on it, but they're warned right away, hey, watch out, someone's coming down the street, and they hit the button, and I don't know how many people know.
Pretty much.
The code enforcement, said that's changing a little bit. I was hoping that we were gonna get a building inspector in the city that he could be working with. I thought this was gonna be kind of reorganized a little bit, because we didn't really put Joe on as a glorified CSO to go look for parked cars and stuff. It was more of a building maintenance problem in the city. He's working hard at it, but there's always more to do.
Yep. Well, and like I say, from what the original vision of that program was, it was very basic. It was trying to have that consistency, and in essence, it was going to be more of a full-time CSO that would have been responsible for the training of the new CSOs and everything else. Because that position has morphed so much, that's why we decided now's the time to break it out, let you know what that cost is involved with what Joe does, and now you know where that is, and how do we want to allocate that, again, with what your vision is and what staff can work at out as well. Does Joe work in conjunction with a building inspector down the road? I know there's some discussion that, you know, there's potentially the ability to afford that based upon the fees, and I don't want to get into Greg's area, but that is potentially a possibility. So I guess what we wanted to do is we wanted to do at least our share of it, or our portion of it, to break that part of it out and kind of let Joe's thing stand on its own, so that, you know, maybe that budget's even in a different spot, or maybe, I don't know. I just wanted to make sure that we had our part of it at least out there, so however the vision for that, or what direction we're going to go with that in the future, the questions there, the answers are there as far as what Joe's part is.
Because I remember getting this sheet, the breakdown of
Yep.
who you call, and, well, that didn't really follow that. When it came to Joe, it really didn't follow that.
How so?
I've had some problems with, well, it'd get to building, and then all of a sudden it would just drop off at some point. If there was major code violations on a building, Joe could take it so far.
Correct.
He didn't have the qualifications, but now I hear he's got the qualifications to tell if a porch is falling off the house, windows falling out, he can say, hey, these porches and stuff.
He can say some of that, but he, to my understanding, can't write the orders to say that this is what needs to be fixed. That actually has to be done by a building inspector with that higher level of certification.
Okay. Well, I was hoping that we would have a full-time building inspector in the city, so those questions could be answered, that we didn't have to pay extra to have somebody go out and.
And that's, you know, again, I hate to go out the crystal ball on that, but maybe that's one of the visions for this going forward of, like you say, Joe was able to take it to a certain level, but we didn't have a full-time building inspector. So does Joe work in conjunction with a building inspector so it's more seamless, that he sees that person on a regular basis? Is that a potential solution to dealing with someone? It very well might be.
I've seen some big improvements on getting yards cleaned up and stuff, but I thought that's something that CSO could possibly do also.
And they still do. Yep,
Yeah.
and they still work with Joe on parts of that as well.
Because as soon as you print code enforcement across the side of the truck, they think it's code enforcement. It's not, hey, just garbage and parking and junk cars, and everybody thought this was going a little bit further.
And again, it has from the original concept, but
And it helps your job in the long run if you can get some of these slumlords, say, I'm just out of the business now. And
Sure.
that's what should be happening, and that's what I thought would be happening, and I don't have the statistics that you have that some of these people just got out of the business, or we just left them alone.
no, I don't have Joe's numbers specifically. That's certainly something we could get you as far as his number of violations, but I guess the best way to kind of see how Joe was doing his spot is he had so many low-hanging fruit. It was really easy to get the cars with the broken windshields and the tires off, you know, and those kinds of things that now he's gone into more of the complicated ones. And you're right, his authority only stops at certain parts, so he can do X, Y, and Z, but when it comes to a foundation or something else, he's out.
And that's maybe something we have to get together with you and community development and see if we can grow this.
And Greg and I certainly have had some conversations on this topic in a general way, as well as the mayor, and it's just more a kind of, where is it, how does it go from here?
Yeah, because talking with some former aldermen and stuff, they just got to a dead end. And he said, this has got to stop. I'm having the same problem with the same people in my district, and all of a sudden it just comes to a dead end, and I think that discussion has to be had.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to continue on with this dialogue that Alderman Zelinski started with our building inspector. I think our code enforcement officer this position was created, I think, about 8 years ago. And it was for him to be able to address exactly those property maintenance issues that have been brought up. And one of the rationales for him to go to the police department in lieu of being under community development was because community development, their role is more or less to kowtow people in the city, to make them feel all warm and fuzzy about doing development in the city and things like that. That's where code enforcement gets a little bit difficult. And one of the reasons I was okay with him going to the police department was because it took him out of that dynamic, and we figured the police department understood enforcement and that enforcement would be able to be done. My experience was when people would have complaints and they would contact me on it, I would send an email to Joe, and then next thing you know, he's checking with Greg to see if he can do enforcement on something. And Greg's not real strong on that because he doesn't believe that enforcement is the way to make people happy. And so that's been a bit of a frustration with me. Also, part of the deal when he was hired was that he was going to get his UDC commercial building inspection credential, so that when he would recognize porches falling off of buildings or items like that, bad roofs and stuff, that he could address those with his UDC commercial building inspector credential. And I was under the assumption that that had happened. And apparently it hasn't, that he's only doing our zoning requirements. And I have lots of conversations with the mayor about our inspections department, and trust me, he's been working hard trying to get our inspection stuff taken care of over the years. It's just difficult because our city isn't big enough to afford to finance an inspections department. It's very, very difficult, and he's tried to partner with other communities, and it just hasn't happened. And so hopefully we continue to try to rectify a lot of that, but this is a frustration. And I think there needs to be some good clarity as to whose responsibilities some of these things are, so if an alderman gets a complaint or something, that they can go somewhere and make sure that these items are addressed without it becoming a political thing. It just becomes an enforcement situation. And I was part of this probably even before I was an alderman, having discussions about getting somebody here to be able to do some of these things. And so it is kind of a frustration from that perspective, and it may not be anybody's fault other than the fact that the tools just aren't in place to make it successful at this point. And at some point there needs to be clarity, and we need to get this figured out and rectified, whether internally or whatever it is, but or whether it be a workshop or something. But a lot of our enforcement things here are difficult, and even with our inspections, you know, to not have our own inspectors that are accountable to the city, that somebody can call up and then direction can be given to an inspector to go out and address something. It's not as easy as it is if we had inspectors that were accountable to the city. Although Joe is, but I'm not sure anybody knows what his total role, or what my understanding and probably other inspectors' understanding is of what his role would be as far as the code enforcement officer. The title says a lot of things. And if we can't go places to get these things taken care of, and we end up with housing stock that's looking bad, and we had a presentation, we were looking at the branding in the city that complains about our housing stock, and realtors complain about our housing stock and the condition of it, and we aren't proactively doing something to get it addressed one house at a time. However that comes up, especially if it's complaint based, we need to look at it and we need to fix it. Otherwise, we're just not going to get better. So if there's anything I can do to help, or to do anything to try to get some direction on some of this, like I said, I was involved in it from the beginning when this was created and when it happened, and it didn't go the direction that I certainly thought it was going to go. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I want to chime in just a little bit on half of the equation here. Sometimes the bigger problem is financial resources to get these things fixed. And we have worked collaboratively between Joe, the housing authority, and building inspections sometimes to get these things fixed. A good example is the house on 2nd Street that's being painted bright red right now. Not super fond of the color, but Joe had worked with them for quite some time because they had started to vinyl side the house, I believe, and ran out of funding to do such. And no matter how many citations you gave them, they just couldn't finish the project because they just did not have those resources. We were able to partner with the housing authority, get them a small loan that would come due when they sell the house, and they were able to fix some of the things that needed to get done, as well as do some of the painting and move forward with that. I think there's some other examples. That's the most recent one that I know of with that, but a lot of times that is the bigger problem. We can tell them that this needs to be fixed. They know it needs to be fixed, but yet there isn't the financial resources. We're hoping that this Rock the Block program through Habitat would also be another source of funding to get some of those things done. And we need to keep partnering with different groups and different financial resources to get those things done. And I think over time it will. I think we'll all agree that there's been some pretty drastic improvements, but there's still properties that need help. And we need to keep working on those and find creative ways to get that stuff done. Alderman Spencer?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one comment on code enforcement and this whole topic. I think this is a very productive topic, and Chief Steika and I have had conversations about what's called a broken window theory, which the study shows a direct correlation between the condition of property and crime within the community. So again, it's very productive. Kind of shifting gears a bit, Chief Steika, thank you for slides I can actually read today. I appreciate that. Ron talking about retiring. Ron is making me feel very old. I worked for many years with his dad, and I remember going over to the Bouchard house on a Friday night playing cards, and here's young Ron coming in asking his dad for the car keys. So, so Ron, thank you very much for your service. I'm very pleased by the focus of the department on positive community relationships. And a number of things you went over today, Chief, focused on that. I think that's commendable, the focus on training, and certainly the focus on positive collaboration with other agencies in the area. I know you've taken a personal interest in that, so thank you for that. And to the department as a whole, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Just real quick, I'd like to thank Alderman Spencer for bringing the positive side to the end of our dialogue, and I didn't mean to make anything sound like what we've been doing, all the positive things the police department does and has been doing, to end on a negative like that. But one other thing I do want to say is where the mayor had talked about enforcement, a lot of enforcement has to do with citations, and I'm not a firm believer of giving people citations and punishing them for not doing what they should be doing. The main purpose for citation is when your normal letters and notices go out, it doesn't work, it brings them to the table to figure out how to go forward. And so when I talk about enforcement, it's about somehow just creating encouragement to get people to the table so we can figure out how to go forward, because citations really only takes away from money that they could be investing in their properties, and it doesn't really do anything. Doesn't do any good just to punish them unless they're just absolutely digging their heels in and refusing to do what they have to do. Like the mayor brought up, a lot of times they just don't have the resources to do it, and because of that they don't even come and discuss that. Sometimes it just gets them to the table to do that. So thank you.
Well, I'm going to join in with what Alderman Spencer said. We had a pretty long discussion about procedural justice training and your philosophy, and I really want to commend you for working on that. I think developing those relationships has really brought us a long way in having people come to the police department and solving problems. I think that philosophy really sets our department apart from others in the community, in the Fox cities and in the state, and obtaining the grant to get that training is phenomenal. So I want to commend you for all the things you're doing on that especially, but other things within the department as well. If there's no one else, we can move on to the next budgets. Thanks for coming this evening. Okay, we have the Park, Recreation, Forestry, Cemetery, and Pool departments here this evening, and we have, I think everyone has met everyone here this evening. So Brian, did you want to take it away?
Well, there's not a whole lot to say about this budget. We do have some roadway paving that we're going to be undertaking.
We're starting with cemetery.
Oh.
Is that what you just said? I just kind of the whole thing.
Okay. I thought we were starting at the top. I'm sorry.
No, cemetery's fine. It's just I want to make sure people didn't think you were saying there's not a whole lot to say about the whole parks budget.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm on page 56 with the Rest Haven Cemetery budget.
Okay.
But what I was saying there is we have some repaving of the roadway out at the cemetery that we have planned within the CIP budget.
Does anyone have questions about the cemetery? Everyone knows that we run a cemetery? Okay. So this is about how much of the roadway it's going to be a multi-year project, correct?
Yeah. How much are we taking on there?
It's probably about 25%.
If there's no questions further about the cemetery, we can go on to the Recreation Department on page 58.
Yeah, this budget is staying pretty close to last year's budget, and just a few of the highlights, I guess, for this past year. Every year we evaluate where we're at programming-wise. For example, on page 58, I mentioned a couple programs that are actually doing pretty well. The archery program is doing really well. We run both a summer and as a matter of fact, we just concluded a fall archery program out of the pavilion at Smith Park, and we had very good attendance. a lot of times these programs do as well as the quality of the instructors that we're able to obtain. And in this case, we have a very good instructor, plus we have a program that's very popular. Youth seem to like the archery. Same thing with gymnastics, high quality instructor, has a good following, and we've more or less converted the upstairs of the memorial building to a gymnastics studio in the last couple years. And so that's working out well. We actually have a partnership with the Y. They have some of their overflow programming comes over and uses the memorial building as well. So, and then yeah, we did the Corny Community Walk, first annual one. The health department received a grant, and I understand they have it again for next year. So we'll do another Corny Community Walk. Our rec staff was heavily involved with that event, and yeah, I think we had about 125 people or so that came to the first event, and so yeah, we hope to replicate that this summer. I guess going into next year, some of you may be aware of our discussions and the approval that we have for a futsal court. I know Alderman Krautkramer is near and dear to his heart, so we hope to get that. We're not heavily involved in the, I guess, in the building of that futsal court. Futsal is a kind of a small court soccer that's held on an old tennis court. So we're going to do that at Pleasance Park. But so the group has permission from the park board to utilize one of those courts over at Pleasance Park. So we think in the spring that they'll start to paint that court and transform it into a futsal court. And we've already taken some steps with the new HR person, Candy, and helping us. We need to do a better job of recruiting candidates for our part-time rec staff. We're not, I guess I wouldn't say we're swamped with applicants. We do okay, but I think we can do better in terms of just getting more applicants in and having better, more people to choose from. I just got done saying that the quality of the program has a lot to do with the instructor, and that is very true. So the more applicants we get, we think the better quality we'll have in our programs. I don't know if there's any questions on the rec budget. Like I say, not a ton of changes there, I guess.
Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian, on that note, you talked about recruiting better applicants or more applicants so you had a better pool to choose from. What would be a motivator for get more applicants? How would you do more recruiting?
Well, we just had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and it was kind of brainstormed some different areas, different locations that we can advertise. UW Fox Valley came up, Fox Valley Tech, even Oshkosh, even Nina School System, St. Mary's. We just, we don't do real well. Haven't done real well at St. Mary's, attracting some of those kids to apply. So yeah, we just kind of brainstormed different locations to advertise.
You did that with the Parks Board or just internally with
we did it internally with Candy, the new HR coordinator. So she'll be helping out with that.
So were they thinking just sending flyers or something to those schools, or going in and doing some recruitment of some sort? Or?
Well, a little bit of that, what you just said. If I guess Lori is contacting a lot of these organizations to just see what they need. Do they want me to come out? Do they want presentations? Do they want just flyers? We want to give them what they need, and we're just not sure exactly what format these schools and need this information in.
Okay, thanks.
Brian, what changed in it, and who was running it before? Because there was a time that this was booming, and all of a sudden now you say it's all up to finding good instructors.
Well, I think we've done okay in terms of applicants. I think even Vince in the park area, we struggle with getting enough applicants there as well. I think we're hiring good people. However, there's that question, if we had,
Who ran
10,
it?
20 more applicants.
Who was running it before we got the new personnel person?
I think Candy's just going to assist. We're not making drastic changes in our recruitment efforts. I think we're just enhancing it.
These are just part-time people that work through the summer and...
Or throughout the year, but primarily the summer.
Yeah. So I don't think our personnel person has to be that involved in it, because she's got bigger issues than worrying about park and rec programming.
I think she's going to assist, maybe not a major role, but she's got the expertise, and we're trying to tap into that.
Okay. Well, who was running it before she was here?
Well, I think we were working with Mike Brunn, a little bit was doing that, but it was more internal, just with myself and administrative assistant. We were just doing that, and like I said, Mike was helping us out with posting jobs on our website and things like that.
Yeah, but you got to get people to reach out if you want more youth in this involved. It's more involved than just posting it out on the website. Okay.
We have any other questions about recreation? Can move on to parks then.
So there's quite a list of things we have planned in the park department this year. Hopefully I got them all listed there on page 61. But yeah, we coming off of I think a pretty active year. The Gilbert site, obviously it was a project that we devoted a lot of time to. Our park guys got involved with the Clovis Grove poured in place rubberized surfacing, and we're still working with Clovis Grove on that. They just donated another piece of equipment to us that we may even have time to get in this fall, or if not this fall, probably early next year. We did a couple of tennis courts at Clovis, and we hope to finish up those courts next year with 3 more, so that site will be completely done. And we did a lot of listening, I guess. In 2015, we had some meetings at Shepherd Park and Wince Park. Some of you are aware there's a pretty active neighborhood group now in the Wince and Jefferson area. So we've been engaged with them, kind of hearing their thoughts on Wince Park and Jefferson Park. And I guess looking ahead to 2016, I'll just kind of quickly run down the list of items that we have on tap. So the new East Side Neighborhood Park, we went through, again, one of these engagement things that we did last year. We got heavily involved with the neighborhood out there, had a variety of neighborhood meetings, and got to the point where they were very involved in the selection of playground equipment. We have not purchased it yet. We had originally thought that would happen in 2015, but we want to go out and see if we can raise some money through some sponsorships. And so I think the mayor and I are going to be out on the road coming up this winter to try to generate some sponsorship funds for that. And the plan there would be to order that equipment in 2016 and then have it in sometime in late May. We're going to do a community build. We have a commitment from the Menasha Rotary Club to help us out with getting that equipment in. So, and I know the neighborhood's very excited about that equipment and getting that project going. The Jefferson Park Neighborhood Master Plan, we have $10,000 in our Parkland Dedication Fund, and I think Greg Kyle, Community Development, has $10,000. So collectively, we have $20,000 in there to finally, I think, cross your fingers, we can get a start on this master plan that I know a lot of folks have been asking about, and so we do want to get started on that in 2016. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the Clovis Grove tennis courts. I mentioned the Clovis Grove PTO. We want to move ahead with some additional poured in place material there at that park, along with putting in this piece of equipment that was just donated. Winds Park, I mentioned that. The park board tomorrow night, they have an action item on their agenda to, I think, hopefully take the first step in getting to a final resolution in terms of the future of Winds Park. We have some maintenance repairs, you know, quite a bit of emphasis on infrastructure, sort of taking care of what we have. And with that, we have the Arc in downtown. There's some tuck pointing and some concrete work that's scheduled for the Arc, and the caboose structure in Smith Park, that's in need of a new roof, and so those items are contained within the budget. And then lastly, we have a second seasonal park labor in the budget, and that is primarily for grass cutting purposes. I guess, you know, we know we have a lot on our maintenance plate, and I don't think any department has, you know, all the staff that they ideally want. And, you know, would we want 2 or 3 more full-time people? Yeah, we probably would, but we're trying to be sensitive to you know where things are at, you know, financially with the city, but we also have an obligation to take care of our parks and our facilities. So, you know, we think that this is a reasonable approach from a labor standpoint, and you know, quite frankly, I think we can do a better job internally of sort of, you know, motivating our staff, working smarter, and maybe a little bit harder along the way in order to take care of our park system. So I guess I don't think that just throwing more bodies at our maintenance is necessarily the complete answer. So you know, we're going to try to do some things internally to just, you know, work a little smarter next year, and and by having an additional body that will help the situation. So I guess that's kind of the summary. If you have any questions about anything on the park budget.
Alderman Keehan?
Thank you. You said you budgeted for the caboose roof. There was also discussion when that item came up about some lighting around the caboose. Is there anything budgeted for the lighting around the caboose? There were some requests by people on the park board who wanted to see some lighting, and there were some people who did not want some lighting.
Yeah, actually, we have installed the conduit that ran from the pavilion over to that structure. It's just right now, the turf in that area is just too soft to get the boom truck to actually mount the fixtures up. We have all the supplies, we just need to install it. So
excellent, thank you.
That was something we did this year.
Thank you.
Alderman Zielinski?
Thank you. I'm on the park board, and we had this discussion about getting things done here, and we keep on adding more and more parkland, more trails, and we're proposing more, and I don't think a half a person is going to make the big difference in this whole thing. And Brian, you kind of agreed with me that we almost need 2 people. And when are we going to have the discussion if we just keep adding parks but we can't maintain them?
Well,
and this is supposed to be our showpiece for the city. We can't have garbage cans in the park anymore because there's basically nobody to empty them. So a half a person to cut grass is the answer for this?
Well, I think these guys will agree. Grass cutting is the #1 thing that takes up the most time, and so that's why we're trying to address that concern with this. Well, I mean, it's an 8-month position, basically a 2/3 time position. So we're trying to, you know, target, you know, the need that we have with our hiring, and so that's why we've elected to go this route. And like I said, I mean, I think it's a challenge to us, and I think management-wise, we have I think we can do better. We can do a better job of taking care of our parks. I know Adam's sitting at the end of the table here, and I know he's more than willing to help out with some street guys on projects, and we need to have better communication. We need to have better planning. We can take care of what we have, I think, better than we currently are with the people that we have. I don't, I want to take this incrementally. I don't want to, come to you guys and say, well, we need 3 people or 2 people or whatever. We'd like to do this incrementally, and again, challenge to the 3 of us sitting here that we can do a better job with the people we have.
So how are we going to gauge this? Or we're not just inventing a park system here. We've had it for how many years, and now all of a sudden, well, we can do it better. What's going to change?
I think the better communication and the better use of the resources and staff that we have will change, and we will hopefully have you folks up here see that change and the public see that change. I mean, is it going to be, huge and dramatic? Maybe not, but, hopefully it'll be better than it is.
Well, I don't know if I'm just getting snowed here because I hear they're not standing around, they're all busy. All of a sudden we're going to reinvent the wheel here and we're going to get more done. I have a hard time believing that.
I think some of it is just coordination. I think Adam would support that. I mean, we just need to line things up. We need to get things scheduled. We need to just, all be on the same page with the projects that Parks has, Streets have, everybody has. And so that's one thing internally that we're going to hopefully do a better job on next year.
Okay, I'm not trying to drill you on this, but Don, what discussion was there with you when they had asked for park help? Because I brought this up, hire 2 guys, and I'm sure you guys had that discussion.
Well, what we actually did was we added this 8-month position and have 1 less summer help position is what's in the budget. I think like Brian is saying, that we need to have priorities. We need to be looking at how to best use our people. We are looking at reducing probably 1 park, with Winds Park not being there next year as well. If you look at where we were 6 years ago, things have improved greatly. I think Vince has taken on some initiatives over the years that have changed how we structured, how we used our people, that have really helped, especially with the lawn mowing capabilities that we used to have designated people for each park, and now we're pooling those resources. And if you really think about where we were and where we are now, I think we're much better. Sometimes the expectations of having a garbage can by every picnic table just aren't realistic.
No, well, we used to have like 5 out there, now we have 0.
We still have garbage cans at every pavilion. We don't have them at every picnic table, though.
Well,
so, I mean,
okay, that's fine, but you can't have garbage cans and have somebody pick it up at the same time. If it gets dropped, they don't have no place really to put it.
Sure.
We've had this discussion many a times, but if you want to talk about Winds Park, we didn't stick anything in there for 20 years. And now all of a sudden we're going to close it, we're going to gain all this extra manpower?
Not saying we're going to gain a whole bunch of extra manpower, but it is 1 less park. You said we're adding stuff.
We must have stuck $50 in it last year.
I think we're heading the right direction. I think this is another
I hope, but
aspect.
We're adding another leg to this trail system, and we're talking about $450,000 worth of trails on the other end, and we're going to do this with an extra half a guy.
I'm not so sure that, well, I'll ask Vince and Adam, but I'm not so sure our trails are really the highest maintenance areas from what I've seen.
No, probably our most time that we spend is mowing, and the thought process is that we could hire a long-term seasonal at a lower hourly rate to do mowing versus having our full-time employees who have many years and at the top of their grade sitting on a mower.
Yes, well, we've been talking.
So that's the
talking
intent.
about that for
I think
years,
the other
right?
thing that we need to look at is how we schedule our guys and what they're doing, and look at some of the projects, and are some of the projects more economical to contract them out versus having our guys do some of those things. So those are some of the things I think that we need to talk about, look at, and how we are scheduling our staff.
And this is just a big surprise now. I find that hard to believe. Thank you.
Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess we're starting to see where all of our budget cuts are starting to catch up with us, where efficiencies are becoming really, really important at this time, because people retire, we don't fill positions, things like that, and you know, we run a pretty tight budget, and it's just a matter of getting some efficiencies. But part of that, Brian, you mentioned communication, and I look at, you talked about our East Side Park and all the meetings you've had with people from out there and provide input, and gosh, I'm the alderman for that area, and I was invited to one meeting. And so I think when it comes to communication, as we get into Wins Park, I think it's make sure that you include your alderman in those meetings if you're going to meet with neighborhood people and stuff, because they certainly deserve to have a presence in those meetings. Thank you.
Anyone else on parks? Comes after parks. Swimming pool.
So 2015 was better than 2014 in terms of attendance. Again, I sound like a broken record up here every year. It really is weather dependent to a great extent. I guess I would sort of classify 2015 as sort of an average, weather year. So we got up over the 21,000 mark. We were at like about 1,000 more people, I think, than last year. Our swimming lesson participation was up a little bit. We had a very successful outdoor movie night. Again, I say weather, it was the perfect weather night. And so we had probably 300 or 400 people at the pool. It really worked out well. I think we picked a little better movie this year too. That might have something to do with it. But so that worked out really well. And then we did undertake some of the slide repairs this year. We're not completely done with that project yet, but we did took care of painting the main structure and the flume. There's some gel coat work that we got into there and ended up needing a little bit more than we had anticipated there for that. And we have $5,000 yet in next year's budget to finish up the railings for that project. And so the slide will more or less be completely refurbished at that point. We'll have to keep an eye on the flume. There were a few areas that we're gonna, that really didn't need much work now, but as time goes on, we may have to go back and touch up some of those areas. I mean, it's no secret that the pool is old, and we're trying to keep it going for a while, and we think we're doing a pretty good job of keeping it going, and I think we can get to the point, we're hoping that this 6-7 years down the road here that we can really get serious about a renovated pool or a new pool. I know, as you all know, the city of Appleton's going through that process now, so we kind of anticipate at some point in the future doing something similar here in Menasha. But I guess that being said, going into next year, we have some filter bags that we need to replace in our filtration system. I think that's about 135 filter bags at the cost of around $6,000. I mentioned the slide railings yet, and we do have I think it's like $700 for a small security camera. We had kind of an ongoing problem around the bike racks. I got a couple calls this past summer about bikes being stolen. So we looked into what it would cost to put just one security camera over by the concession stand, kind of shooting right down into the bike rack area there. So I think there's $700 in the budget to do that. It's a pretty simple process from what I understand from the IT folks. So that's, I guess, sort of that's the highlight of the pool budget. I guess I would add that we did, if you look at the 2015 wage number there was Vince had several hours of his guys over there working on the pool deck. They were also doing some of the breakdown of the slide railings and things like that. So we I think we need to take a look at a little bit more accurate, a little bit better job of accurately reflecting the park department hours that are over at the pool. So that's something we're going to be taking more of a look at. We also have some money in here to buy some, I think under the tools and equipment, the 3015 account, there's some new life jackets and rescue tubes, things like that that we need for rescue tubes for the guards. Life jackets are more for, you know, swimming lessons. I know the pool manager showed me the condition of the life jackets towards the end of the year, and yeah, they're pretty much falling apart. So we need to invest in a few more life jackets for the swim lesson program.
Does anyone have questions for Brian about the pool budget? Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Part of the swimming pool there's one of the bigger parts of the Jefferson Park master plan that we're going to work on has to do with the swimming pool. And so my comment isn't so much on the swimming pool itself, but more on the master plan for it. And I forgot to bring it up when we were under just the regular Parks Department, but I'm going to put this one on Peggy a little bit. I'd like to see a quarterly report on the master plan, the progress we're making on the master plan, and I put it on Peggy for Peggy to remind you to do it, so that we see it. And just to me, that's just more of a deal where it's quarterly, you have to report on the progress that's being made. Is that progress is being made? If you have something to report on, then you're going to make sure that something gets done on it. This has been going on for a long time. I think I was on the park board or park committee 3 years ago, and we're working at it pretty hard. We're really making some good headway. And then whether it be budget or resources, people, whatever it is, kind of fell off the radar. So I don't mean any disrespect by asking for that, but I think it's a pretty good motivator to make sure if you have to report to council with a communication on what the status of it is, that we continue to make progress on it. Thank you.
And I ask that we take that off Peggy's shoulders, because that's not really her responsibility. You put it on mine instead. But I think the quarterly report is not,
well,
is not unreasonable to ask for.
No, it's not.
So.
And I can talk to you why I took that direction later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on the pool?
You've been on that committee for quite a while.
What, for the park?
Yeah. the master
And I can take some of the comments about that, because I did direct Brian not to move forward on that because we were working on other things, and I felt that if we're going to put a master plan out there, we have to have some expectation of starting to implement that plan. And being that we were implementing several other things at that point, I did ask him to hold off on that.
And that was part of the discussion with Wynn's Park. If we're gonna take these amenities away, why don't we split this park in half? If you're worried about the far east end of the park, let's start implementing something in this park to take care of some of these amenities that we're gonna take away. There isn't a basketball court at Jefferson Park.
Sure.
And we're talking about taking about 2 of them away from Wynn's Park. Where are these kids gonna play? And that was part of the problem, but we're waiting for this master plan, and we've been waiting for this master plan for how many years now? And then all of a sudden, the coast, or the armory goes away, and now we're gonna probably talk about water. Let's just split this park in half and see what we can do to put the amenities that these people need in this park.
Like I said, we didn't have the financial resources to do those things at that point, so I didn't feel it was responsible to put out this big, pretty master plan and put all these expectations forward and then say, oh, but by the way, it's going to be 12 years before we implement any of this.
But then tell people way on the east side that they're getting a park, and well, we're waiting for the master plan here because we don't have money for this. And these people have been waiting for a park for quite a while.
On the east side? Well,
Yeah.
That's a separate, we purchased that and we are
Yes.
implementing
But
that.
they've been waiting for that and trails, and I've been hearing some of the stuff from some people that I know that live out there, and they're.
And as we all know, our budget is very tight, and this is what we have the funds to do with at this point.
That's when you start moving some money around.
Maybe just
Cool.
to touch on, I think, Alderman Benner, I think the first part of your question was how does the pool get integrated into Jefferson Park? No?
No.
Okay, all right.
It really wasn't. It was just, I had it in my mindset to talk to you about it under parks. And the swimming pool was, when I was on the Parks Board, the swimming pool was just a huge part of the conversation as far as the master plan. And it just kind of reminded me to go back and ask about, to get continued updates on the status of the master plan. Because that swimming pool is just such a huge component to that. That's just what reminded me of it. So
the way I envision that working is that the park master plan won't so much get into the detail. It'll sort of be the footprint. Where is the location of the pool within the park? You know, it won't get into square footage of the bathhouse or whatever, but yeah.
Well, I understand, and a big part of our dialogue was to build a new pool, relocate the pool, or to restore the existing pool. And as I recall, that never did, obviously it didn't come to fruition to make that decision, and that won't come for some time to come. Like I said, that just reminded me that we're talking about the pool to get continued updates on it, so that we make sure that there's progress happening on that, so that, you know, we do have money budgeted for it, just to make sure that we don't get to the end of the year and then all of a sudden we really haven't done anything, or now we're just going to start on it or something. We just want to make sure it keeps moving. That's my only thought. So I know it's tough with resources, time that people have to allocate at something, but at least it kind of pushes it to make sure that something continues to happen on it. Thank you.
Anything else on the pool? You want me to take Heckrod, Brian?
Sure.
Okay.
Heckrod.
So, well, there is a change in Heckrod. We got a notice from Heckrod 3 months ago, maybe, Debbie, something like that. Okay, August. She remembers the date better than I did. And I met with Heckrod a few months ago, and we talked a little bit about Heckrod's priorities for their programming and how they use that facility. We were looking for ways to minimize the impact on their programming when we hold elections at Heckrod. And after, a bit of discussion, we came to the conclusion, actually they came to the suggestion that the use of the space was more important than the financial donation to the center, and they would much rather see more programming done in that space as part of Heckrod's programming, and offered if we could find another location, they would forego that donation to Heckrod. So we left on a very amenable, positive note at that point and went out looking for other places to hold those elections. We did find another location at the Winnegamie Dog Club, which looks like it will work as good, if not better, than Heckrod. And therefore we did adjust the budget to just include the insurance for Heckrod rather than a donation back to the building. So I don't know if anyone has questions on that. Okay, then we can move on to the next budget is the forestry budget.
Forestry budget. We again, we're the Tree City USA recipient for the 32nd year in a row, and we also again worked with EW Fox Valley on a tree campus designation and the utilities on the tree line. See, there's a little typo in there, tree line designation. For this year's Arbor Day, we believe we will be working with the Jefferson Park neighborhood group. That we've already worked with them a little bit this fall on some tree planting, and we just talking about Jefferson Park. One of the things that will be hard hit in that park is the tree population. A lot of ash trees in Jefferson Park. So we think there are areas that we can tree plant right now without adversely impacting the master plan. There's certain areas along the water and so forth that probably won't change a whole lot. So that's probably where we'll be for this spring's Arbor Day program. Other than that, there's some money, $2,500 in this budget for trees, that amount has stayed the same. And there is $700 in there. Our arborist needs to have his certification updated with the Wisconsin Arborist Association. So you will see $700 in that budget. But aside from that, it's not a whole lot of changes in the forestry budget.
Does anyone have questions regarding forestry? Okay, the next one is the Marina, and that's moving down a few pages on page 159.
So last year we installed a new Wi-Fi system. It's gotten good reviews from the renters down at the Marina. Coming into this next year, we have again sort of the infrastructure theme that we started on here. We need to replace the roof at the Harbor House and the fuel dispenser down there. We're gonna get a refurbished one. We found what people tell us, they're very good to just go out and get a refurbished one. So it's about $5,000 or so for the roof and a similar amount for the fuel dispenser. And I guess the other sort of overarching thing with this budget is that we need, down the road, 2020, there's going to be some fuel tank and system upgrades mandated by the state, and so we want to make sure that we're socking enough money away in that Marina fund to take on what is going to be a pretty big number coming up in about 4 years. So that's just something that we're trying to plan ahead for. And 2016 will be the last year of the harbor master contract, and as far as I know, Diane Schabach, wishes to come back. So I think she's done a great job for us over the years, and I don't know how much longer she's going to want to be the harbor master there, but at least for, I think, another 3 years at least, I think is what she's thinking. The other thing we have in the Marina budget, 2 years ago, we put in a camera system, and that was very well received by renters as well, but we did notice at least one spot that we'd like to do a little bit better job with a camera, so we do have money in there for a wireless camera, probably to be installed on the light pole, sort of in the center of the Marina, down by the canal. We want to get a better camera, sort of on the northeast corner of the Marina, and that should take care of our security needs down there.
Does anyone have questions about the Marina? Alderman Zielinski?
Yes. I just spoke with somebody that has a membership at the Appleton Yacht Club, and they're talking about possibly closing these locks for 2-3 years with the DNR. Is there any discussion going on with you and Diane, the Yacht Club, DNR? What's the long-range plans there? Because there's that possibility that you could be filling this thing up with a lot longer boats than we're having in there now, and it could really help the revenue stream. So I don't know if it's a first-come, first-served thing, if this is true.
What was the first part of your question? Was closing the locks?
Closing the locks because of this fish, that roan
Oh,
goby.
yeah. Well, all right.
And they're talking about possibly 2 or 3 years being closed. Was there any, did you have any discussion?
I don't have an
this?
update on it. We just about 2 weeks ago, we had just happened to be talking to the DNR fish biologist, and I know they're in discussions on that. He had no real update. We asked him that question, what the status of the lock is, and he really didn't have an answer for it. I guess what Diane and I have talked about that, and I guess the good thing for Menasha is they have access to Lake Winnebago. If that lock would close, I think we're situated pretty well. It obviously wouldn't be the greatest thing, to have that lock closed, but I still think we could have a viable marina.
Well, we will
based
have
on our
a viable
location.
Marina, because most of these people head for Lake Winnebago. You don't have these big boats and you go tooling around Little Lake Butamore until you knock your props off. So most of them head towards Lake Winnebago or Oshkosh. So I was just wondering if there's some discussion with Diane and the yacht club down there for opportunity, because I heard once that we're getting smaller and smaller boats in the Marina, and if we fill it up full of sailboats, they aren't going to sell any gas. And is there any discussion going on, or?
What you've said is generally true about the size of the boats. little bit smaller boats. People are not buying, or they're getting rid of their, bigger boats. But not, I wouldn't say there's a dramatic change in revenue, but the boats are getting a little smaller.
Okay, because there's a lot of expense to owning a marina. And the ongoing future costs are going to be up there. I just wondering if this is going to be a bigger revenue stream, if we should be looking at that. And I don't know if the DNR is ever going to declare what they're going to do with the locks for this next coming season. But there'll be a lot of people fleeing the Appleton Yacht Club for bigger waters.
Right.
Anybody else on the marina? The next one is the Parks Development Fund.
So the three items that you'll see in here is one is the $10,000 that I mentioned for the Jefferson Park Master Plan that's contained within this budget, and I also mentioned earlier we have $100,000 set aside for the East Side Park playground equipment purchase, and then the other $15,000 there is for the Barker Park trail connection to the memory care facility. We're gonna pick up that trail from the northeast corner of that facility, and when it hits the park boundary, and bring it into the center of the park. And this is one of those projects that we need to coordinate with the street department, because we want them. We're talking about probably I believe an 8-foot wide asphalt trail. They're roughly 500 feet, give or take. And so that's something that we want to get in next year.
Is there any questions about that one? And then the Capital Projects Fund, we talked about a lot of those items, but I noticed you missed at least one.
Yeah, I missed, well, maybe two. One was the Hart Park play equipment in there. $45,000. That equipment is probably the oldest equipment that we have, and it's something that we should address. I know there's there's some ADA concerns there, and also I think some playground safety issues that we're not completely in compliance there too. So that we've had our eyes on replacing that equipment for several years now, and so fortunately there's some funding in the capital budget to take care of that next year. And then the other thing there is the $100,000 for the I guess you'd call it the first installment of the Loop the Lake project there. Ultimately, we're looking at a $300,000 city commitment. However, I guess we'll have to see, as you've heard, see how the fundraising goes. It's not an absolute, but I think that's what we're planning on at this point is a total of $300,000.
Does anyone have questions on that account? No. Then the Recreation Special Fund and the Park Special Fund and the Forestry Special Fund are on page 242.
Those are anticipated donations, I believe, right? Yeah, just donations for recreation, parks, and forestry. Recreation side, we usually get some sponsorship funds coming in for our rec programs, primarily our baseball program. We get some dollars coming in there. Parks department, that's typically a bench or something comes in that way. And forestry department, it's trees, people buying or donating memorial trees, that sort of thing. Not large numbers, but they're shown there on page 242.
And I think that is the last one. Did anyone think of anything else in the meantime that they wanted to ask Brian, Vince, or Adam? Seeing nothing else, thanks for coming tonight, gentlemen. You're trying to show up both the chief and I with the most colorful presentation, aren't you? I think Peggy won with most colorful.
I don't have any pictures.
No.
So, well, wait a few minutes, or are you ready to go?
Let's wait until Marshall comes back.
Okay.
Okay, you're up, Peggy.
Okey doke. Well, what I want to do is I just want to start with a picture of our new department. As most people know, this spring, council approved the Administrative Services Department. Kind of a long time in coming. I've been here now 2 years last month. Time flies. But over time, in those first couple of years, I was getting comfortable with the finance, IT, assessor areas, and then parts of the human resources area. Finished that up in the spring, and now we have everybody in administrative services basically on the first floor, with the exception of IT, who we've relocated to a much larger and nicer workspace in the ground level. So that's the way our department looks as of right now. I think it's pretty functional. I think we obviously have some improvements to make and room to grow, but I think we're doing okay right now. So I thought I could maybe just start with each individual area, talk about accomplishments from 2015 for the assessor. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the tax situation we had last year and some improvements we made in the assessor's area. We did establish different timeframes for the assessor to complete their work, and reporting and recording requirements, and I'm happy to say that they've done all of those things in 2015. We had a good spring and summer with the Board of Review, open book, etc. Everything was filed on time. We did complete our RFP for the assessor earlier this year. 2012 was the last time that was done. We're using the same assessor, Associated Appraisal. Again, I think there's some room for improvement, but we have some plans in place so that we meet with them and checkpoint on how things are going and where we're at on a regular basis. We've also actually scheduled a meeting for the end of this week for them to start helping us. They do certain things as the assessor on their time schedule, but our departments need help from them on our time schedule. So our associate planner, Kevin Engelbert, actually took the initiative, and him and I are going to be meeting with Associated to go through some of those things this week. So I think we're on the right track with that. And the agreement does go through the summer of 2018. We didn't change the ordinance because it's a charter ordinance, but the time frame is much better as far as the assessor's work and what goes on. The end of July is really the end of their work as opposed to April. 2016, certainly we're going to go through and set up our time frame. Clerk Galeazzi needs to do all the setup for the open book and things, and I think we'll stay on the same schedule we had in 2015. Make sure we get that done so that by the second Monday in June we can get that report filed through the state. We obviously need them to accurately assess the properties and complete all of their tasks in a timely manner. And then again, this is just what I was mentioning as far as the ancillary services that they provide and they can help us with as a city. And of course, we always want them to reply to citizen inquiries in a timely manner, and I think they've been doing a good job with that. Budget changes for the assessor, really nothing. As far as program and services, no change. It's going down a little bit citywide, and I think that's something you're seeing continually through the budget. The IT budget is going down, so it affects each department. We did reduce the budget for the Department of Revenue's manufacturing assessment that they bill us each year. It seems like they've stabilized that number, so we've stabilized our budget, and then there's just a few other minor areas that went down. The next thing would be finance. I think we've had a pretty good year in finance.
And Peggy, do we want to talk about assessment first?
Sure.
I don't know if there's any questions. It's a pretty cut and dry department, but Just wanted to make sure before we got too far along.
Yep.
Okay, looks like no, so
Okay.
right on to finance.
All right, this is some of our good story, I think, to tell. We did do the refinancings, 2 sets of them this year, interest savings only goals. We're going to be saving over $315,000. That's over about the next 7 to 8 years, which really helps our debt plan and our overall budgeting. We did get the investment grade bond rating back from Moody's in January of this year. I think that was something positive. I know a lot of our neighboring communities as well as Moody's themselves are talking about this. We conducted the rate study that I don't need to remind anybody about. We do have our new rates implementing for services as of November 1st, and we're moving forward with that. Another thing we did as far as an audit fix was the way we were keeping track of our fixed assets. It was kind of at year end, we would throw everything together and hope we had everything. And what we did last year, well, earlier 15 as part of the 14 process, was to establish a process so that each month or each week when we make our payables checks out, we grab everything that has fixed assets related to them, so we're able to keep track of them on a regular basis, and I know the auditors are pretty happy with that. And then, of course, the TID 13 financing plan took some time this year, as well as just working with different departments on their accounting and financial needs. Something I didn't put on here, but I'm certainly going to be doing in 2016 is I want to start presenting quarterly financial statements to the council. The general fund, we talk about the general fund often, and I just think if we could maybe talk about it a little bit on a quarterly basis through a report, nobody would be quite as surprised at year end or at budget time when we start talking about why certain revenues or expenditures are up or down. So that's something that I want to create. Just to give you a heads up, it's not a March thing. I can't do it for the end of first quarter just because we're focusing on the 2015 closeout. But by May, end of May, I would hope to have the first quarter, and then before the budget kickoff, the second quarter, etc. So that would be a goal for 2016 as well. We do also want to do a total comprehensive review of all of our TIF financing districts. I have probably 6 out of our 10 done, but I think that's something important, especially as you're seeing all of these projects in the budget coming through on the TIFs. I think sometimes it's a little easier to say, yeah, we can do that, that's the TIF, that's not the general fund. But I think if we could just start looking at those on a regular basis as well, we can make sure we prioritize the highest ones first and be able to afford everything. So that's something coming. 2016 financing plan, really not planning any refinancings. It would just be anything from the 2016 budget that we would be doing, as well as monitoring our existing debt. I think end of 2015 is something, we had a previous alderman, and I think he was right on track as far as asking for us to review our fund balance policy, and I think we're at a point where beginning of 16 we'll be able to do that. And then the next one is just really a reporting and regulatory issue. And of course we want to account for and monitor all city funds and work with the CIP. Get a little backed up at this time of year with our CIP, but I think what we need to do is we just need to change our planning document CIP, our 5-year piece, to the spring, summer, so that when we get to budget we can just focus on the next year. So hopefully we can do that next year. And then of course Mark mentioned to you the other night that we're going to be looking at the sewer utility rates in 2016. As far as the 2016 budget changes for finance, you can see those numbers there. 2015 budget estimate. Sorry, and that next one should say 2016 budget. 2016 budget is a little bit higher than 2015. The sole reason for that is we had a benefit change in our department. As of 2015, we had 1 more employee take health insurance that hadn't before. Did have it offset by a number of things. We have a GASB 4345 post-retirement benefit report that we do every year. Every other year, it will not be done in 2016. And then again, the IT costs will be going down.
Did anyone have questions on finance? Alderman Spencer?
Yes, what was our bond rating before, like, just point of reference, like before the steam plant?
I think it was a single A3.
Okay, so where is that in relation to where we are now?
I believe we're 3 steps down.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Alderman Benner?
On that bond rating note, are there everybody always uses Moody's as kind of as a standard, and is there other folks that you can get that bond
There are.
rating from, and are they pretty much comparable, or like if you had it from somebody else and it said something different than what the Moody's says, how is that viewed?
There is another big one, S&P. It's, I don't want to say that one's more reputable than the other. I think Standard & Poor's probably gives governments a better shake than Moody's does, especially in this changing environment with some things that have gone wrong with cities across the entire nation. I think Moody's really pulled back a couple of years ago. I want to say spring of 2013. They re-rated everyone, and basically just about everyone's ratings dropped by one notch. And that was because I think Moody's was afraid they weren't seeing enough and they weren't doing enough. And then as far as the restrictions on tax levy and different things from, especially in Wisconsin, I know that hurt Wisconsin municipalities. But I am glad we did it in the order we did, i.e. we got the Moody's rating back up, and then if and when we're ready to go back to the public market for borrowing, we can choose either one. We can choose either S&P or Moody's. Sometimes it looks bad if you can't bring your rating up with one agency and then you jump to someone else, kind of shopping for a rating.
Sure.
But I think I like the way we went right now, and we could go either way when we go out in the future.
And obviously we had Moody's when we started.
Right.
So then if you get that differential and then you come back, at least you have that exact comparable
Right.
to work from. Okay, thank you.
Peggy, do you want to talk a little bit about the process of what we might want to do to re-enter the market? I believe we don't have any rated bonds left. Everything is through the state trust now.
Correct. So in August, we did our last set of refinancings. That was the 250-ish thousand that we saved. At that point, we already had our rating back. There was nothing to be gained by holding on to that debt to do another surveillance rating. So we just went ahead and refinanced that, gave us some interest savings. Going back into the market, I think with the money that we're borrowing right now, not to minimize it, but it's too small of an amount, because when you go to the public bond market, you can get usually better rates than you can through the state, although in these interest rate times, it's not that much of a difference, but there's a lot of additional costs involved with public borrowings and public offerings. So I think it would probably be when we have something bigger, i.e. maybe a central garage renovation, a swimming pool, a police department. It's got to be some big expenditures that we'd want to go to the market for, just to make it worth our time and money to do that. But
given that, we have talked about possibly doing a smaller one just to see what the attitude would be.
And we could certainly do that. The reality is the further we get away from that, 2009 is a long time ago right now for investors. So I think that shadow is kind of gone, especially being that we got back to a rated status. But 2017, 18, 19 might be a good time to test the waters on that. And sooner if the need arises. If we had a need for it this year and 2016, I wouldn't be afraid.
Anyone else have questions about finance for Peggy? Oops, we're not going in the same order as the sheet. So, human resources.
Okay, so 2015, obviously we talked about that a few minutes ago. Last piece of the transition happened this spring. We had our temporary help retire in June, and for better or for worse, we had 6 positions that we replaced between June and August, 6 FMLA work comp issues, and a whole host of other HR issues. So that's pretty much what I did all summer. But that's not a bad thing, because what it did is it gave me a good chance to see all of the operations as far as our human resources go. We've been doing a lot of things, you know, in addition to all the movings and things like that. What Brian mentioned earlier about helping with the parks hirings, I think you're right, Alderman Zielinski. We don't have to be intimately involved with that, but we have to set up a process, because over these past few years, what we've done is we've decentralized a lot of HR things. And what we need to do is we need to keep ourselves legal and responsible. And so I think by having Candy be involved in those kind of things, just to set up the programs, do the training, make sure that everybody knows what's expected and what will be tolerated, et cetera, that's where we want to be involved, not necessarily in the actual you know, sitting down and talking with everyone. But as far as what you were mentioning, Alderman Benner, Candy does want to go into the schools. She wants to see, do they have job fairs going on, et cetera? Is there someplace where she can be present? The reality is the jobs we have available, kids love to have. So we just have to get out there and reach out to the right audiences. So we're going to be working on that. We do have, in 2015, we worked on our health insurance plan. You know that. You approved that a couple meetings ago. We did have our open enrollment starting on November 1st, and I'm happy to say everybody was pretty happy about that as far as city employees and having enough time to weigh it against maybe a spouse's employer, et cetera. Our open enrollment goes through November 20th, so we're getting close on that. We have started reviewing the policies, and we hope to have a lot more for the council, i.e. personnel committee, to review in 2016. And we looked at all of our, with all those new positions that we recruited for, we had some terminations, some retirements, et cetera, and what we were doing is updating all of our checklists and things to make sure that when somebody comes on board, we're telling them what they need to. When somebody's leaving, we're telling them what we need to. And when somebody's planning for retirement, we help them as much as we can. So those are just some of the things we've been working on over the last couple of months. And right now we're in the process of negotiating with our bargaining unit for fire. 2016, certainly our number one goal is to work with employees and supervisors on any personnel related matters. We are going to be working with CIVMIC on an HR audit. CIVMIC is our liability provider, and they do all of our employment practices liability. I've been working with them very closely since I have been working on HR here, and what they can do is they can come in 2016 and tell us where we're differing on policies, where we're differing on practices, just things we can do to tighten up a little bit, make sure we're going in the direction we need to. NeoGov is an onboarding software package. Software package is probably worth about $15,000. CIVMIC purchased it a couple of years back, and they basically offered it to all of their communities, so that's something that we definitely want to take advantage of. We think it'll be a huge efficiency, as well as it'll help us with a lot of our regulatory reporting. There you see the policy manual. Talked a little bit about the recruitment process already. We're doing an audit on all of our personnel and medical records. I think sometimes when we're going from day to day and we forget to look at some of that stuff, you go back and you have to find something, or you get an open record request for something and you don't have those records in order. It doesn't make the city look very good. So we're focusing on that. We're also doing audits on all of our benefits, health, dental, vision, life, et cetera, making sure whatever the census from the company says is what our records say and is what we're billing out through our payroll. So that's another initiative we have. We do want to start looking at performance evaluation planning in the future. We have a couple departments that are already started on it, and I think if we can all go down the path together, it'll be good for the city, and then obviously maintaining payroll and administering our benefits. 2016 budget changes for HR. You can see those numbers there. It is going down. Part of it is going down because of the switch of staffing. City attorney is no longer in this budget. Administrative assistant, HR, i.e. our payroll specialist is now 100% in the budget. And then there were a few other reductions just based on some advertising. We're doing advertising for positions a little bit differently, different things like that.
Does anyone have questions about HR? Alderman Benner?
This is, maybe I should wait till you're done, but thinking about, was that the Springstead study? Is that what that was called a couple of years ago? So many of the things that, which included your hire and your job title and your job description, came from that. And so many things that was mentioned in that study reflected how HR performs and how we do. And where are we sitting with that study right now, as far as you can do it from a percentage basis, or you can hit on some topics of things that study had addressed and where we are in the process. Now, obviously, that whole study, we probably would not implement everything in it because it may not just fit with the dynamics of the city. But where are we at with that study right now?
You know, I wasn't here when the study was done, but I have read it a number of times, and I'll start and then I'll let the mayor chime in if he needs to, but I think we're pretty much accomplished. There was some public works things that were in there, talked about the merging of public works and parks. You heard about that tonight. The lead people, last fall we did the public works lead person. This spring we did the parks one. I think as they get those a little bit more acclimated, that was part of it. The HR stuff, obviously, the Administrative Services Department was a big one. One thing I forgot to mention here is the partnership with the utilities as far as HR goes. That was another big piece of the study. I think that was one of the things that the study actually asked for. Two things. One of them was HR and one of them was IT. IT, nothing has been combined. I'm not sure of the interest to combine on the utility side for that, but as far as HR goes, I know the utilities weren't excited exactly about it. At the beginning, general manager from the utilities recruited for the position with me has been working on it. We are meeting on a monthly basis to talk about what's going on. We're billing them out on a monthly basis. Candy has been helping them with some of their open enrollment. Now they have a set of recruitments coming up here, 1 or 2 sets, and she's going to be working with them for a number of days. So I know that one's gone through. I think those were the big things, but
the big things, yes. The other thing is the employees at the utilities are really excited about this because they see this as kind of a neutral person, and they're very excited about having that type of a person on staff that they can talk to and be part of those HR decisions. So
good.
And I know Candy's already actually worked with a few of the employees, so we have gotten some positive feedback already on that.
I think we're probably the majority through, but I wrote down on my list of things that we should maybe do a report on, that we should probably look at the implementation, and are there things that have not been completed, and do we want to complete those things or not?
Yeah, last year I asked for a report, and then when Peggy did her review of the budget and all that stuff, a lot of the questions and thoughts that I had, she had addressed, and so I was good with it. And of course I was thinking about it this year, but I thought I'd wait through this process to find out where we were, because I thought that for whatever we would be doing, that we were substantially complete on.
I would agree
on that, and so I really didn't. I just thought I'd wait and see how this process ironed out, and I'm really happy with everything that's happened in the last 2 years. So one other thing I did just want to make a comment, and you touched on it with HR a little bit, and there may be some perceptions when Parks was speaking about efficiencies with personnel and things like that, and I think it's just important for folks to recognize, and I know you recognized it, but that it's not that our employees are necessarily working inefficiently. I think they're kind of, right now, with the amount of resources that we've had and the changes that we've had, they're in a semi-inefficient environment, and I think we're making a lot of good progress in making that environment more efficient, because I don't think anybody doesn't want to provide efficient quality work. It's just, I think that a little bit of the environment that they're in is inefficient through a lot of changes, and I think with the addition of Candy, which takes a lot of things off of you, helps to get a lot of those things organized and put in place. And
I think so too, and I think the other part of that is I think our field services are doing a really good job. Adam Alex has been in the job for about a year and a half, and he's really been tackling some tough issues and bringing people together, and I think over time we'll knock down more of those barriers, but I know they're working really hard on that.
But even just the fact that they're willing to talk about it publicly and know that they recognize that there's room for improvement, some efficiencies, to me goes a long way to know that those things are going to get better. So, thank you.
IT, last section. Well, in 2015, or actually 2014, we decided we had an IT manager and a supervisor of IT support, and when our IT manager left the organization, we had an opportunity to look at things, and what we did at that point is we brought in a consulting partner, Infinity Technology, and we've been working with them probably for a good year and a half now, and things are going very well. I think We spent the first maybe 9 months or so kind of stabilizing the environment, checking things out, making sure we were using best practices, et cetera. Last year, then we came back and we did some network backbone improvements. Beginning of this year, we had the 2 new servers implemented. We had a really big project this year. As far as our police department goes, CJIS requires them to have their own separate network from the rest of the city. They can't, because of the sensitive information that they use through the state and the feds, they can't have unauthorized users on their system. So basically for about the last 6 months after the servers got in place, that's what we've been doing, is splitting the police network off from everyone else. And it's been a big chore, but I think by the end of 2000, we have everything separated now. Now it's locking it down and doing the advanced authentication. So I think we're getting pretty close. By the end of the year, we should be good to go on that. We did do the Marina solution. It was part 1. We do have a couple other pieces to do next year, but we got some good results from that. Our biggest project for 2016, which I'll tell you about on the next slide, is really storage. With all the different changes we have going on in the organization, whether it be in engineering or one of our big players is police, we have a storage challenge right now. And so we've been juggling storage for a few months. Once we get our new storage in place, if it's approved in the 2016 budget, that'll be our last stabilizing measure as far as the networks go. And hopefully then we can continue on some other initiatives. We did replace a number of PCs this year, and we have the website going. The website has been on the back burner for about 3 weeks. I do have a design implementation homepage and department pages from the designer. What we wanted to do is just kind of get through this budget process. I do have IT steering committee, which Alderman Nichols is chairing, meeting on the 19th to talk about that, along with our website selection committee. And then we'll be bringing the design to the council the first meeting in December. So hopefully, once we get those 2 pieces done, it's a matter of just doing our transition over to the new site. We do have a 5-year replacement plan in place now, as well as I'm going to say rough draft of our overall 5-year IT plan. We'll be working on that over the next few months as well. And of course, we're maintaining all the systems. The IT support items, I'm really proud of what Patrick and Infinity have been doing, because when I first started working with them in IT, we had about over 100 plus support items open at any given time. Right now we're at about 20, and of those 20, there's only about 12 of them that are true support items. The other 8 are project items we need to get to as we move forward. So you'll see a couple of those on the next page. 2016 website's going to be for the end of this year, quarter 4, as well as quarter 1 of next year. Website will be top priority. There's that storage I mentioned. A close second to that is this citywide parcel management system. We've been talking about this with community development and public works. And really, I think every department can use it in some way. That's something we need to move forward on. And then the next items are really just repeats of what we've been talking about on the prior page. IT budget, you can see 2016 through 14. When I say technology, all budgets, IT has an internal service fund, 743, and what that does is captures all the global costs for IT, and then there are some department-specific ones. What we've been doing is we've been working really hard, not necessarily to lower the budget, but to put an organized plan together, and I think by putting our organized plan together, we were able to put a more stable budget together, i.e. we're not going to be asking for 25 PCs in 1 year anymore. We're not going to be asking for changes. You know, when we do our next 2 servers, it's going to be over the course of 2 years. When we start looking at desktop virtualization, it's going to be over the course of a number of years. So what we're really trying to do is stabilize and flatten out the IT budget. No real changes in the 16 budget from the 15 budget. We did add the web hosting, but that's something you're already aware of. And then the parcel management that we spoke of. Do you want to talk about any IT questions?
Alderman Benner?
Mr. Mayor, our phone system, what's the status of that? I know we've been picking other people's dumpsters to maintain our phones.
Actually, we stopped doing that. We stopped doing that a couple of years ago. That was actually before I even came. They stabilized the phone system mid to late 2013, and did a revamp on the voicemail system.
Oh.
And both have been in very good shape. We have online reporting and recording for both. We're not searching for parts on the internet anymore. I think it's pretty stable.
Okay, good, thank you.
Alderman Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The storage issue is that, you mentioned there has to be separation between the police department and the rest. Is that true for storage as well? Do you have to have a firewall between the two?
It is.
And so is the big consumer of storage, is that like the body cams for the police department?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the more we do, the more it goes. We're looking at a new system right now, Data 911 is what they're testing. And that could expand into interrogation room cameras and different things like that. We have some older, we have all pieces. We have body cams, we have the car cams, we have the interrogation room cams. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to find something that'll give them a total solution. But you're right, every step we take forward on video comes HD and more HD and bigger sizes. So I'd say maybe 75% of our storage needs are police needs.
Have we had any open records requests for videos?
Not that I know of. They do a really good job at separating out what's available and what's not.
Anyone else on IT? And you have your overall?
This is just, you know, this is just me wanting to start keeping track on an annual basis. 2015 and 2016 aren't exact comparisons because we have some staffing changes and things like that. So I just want to be fair on that one. But now from year to year, I'll be able to show some comparisons. And that's all I have. But I do want to make sure any of you are welcome anytime during the year. Ask us what's going on. We'd be happy. Anybody in any of my department would be happy to share anything with you that you need to know. We're in this together. Now, I do have some smaller budgets that I didn't talk about. If you want to go through those, just like the illegal tax account and things like that.
Okay.
It's really up to you.
It's up to you guys if you'd like to. Well, there's one there that's a new one, the room tax, that might be worthwhile to talk about a little bit. And then I don't know if there's really any changes in any of the other ones. If anyone would like any of the other ones, we're more than...
Yeah, the room tax one we started in 2014. Through a county audit, they found out that we had what they called, we don't have any hotels, but we have what you call maybe a tourist rooming house where people rent out their homes. And then in the summer of 2014, Fox Lodge came on board. So now I have 4 room tax payers, and that's a quarterly thing. I estimated $3,000 collected in 2016. I'm probably pretty close.
How do you track that?
How do I track it? I have some forms that I made up, and then each quarter by if the quarter ends on March 31st, by April 30th, all 4 of those operators have to send me information, and that's confidential information. That's not to be shared with anyone. That's their P&L's information. And then by the next month, I have to report it to the CVB and get our payments out for our code. So those happen on a quarterly basis.
This is basically whatever they report to you, you report to the CVB.
Correct, yeah. There's a convoluted formula that it goes through. Basically, about 90% of it goes to one entity. The other one goes to the Fox Cities Performing Arts, but because we weren't in their original resolution, they weren't accepting our money. So it was kind of an interesting story, but...
So that'll be on the next agenda, actually, to update that ordinance.
Yep.
Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm kind of wondering where we're at right now with the room tax with the city of Appleton. They were going to request that all the neighboring communities participate for their exhibition center. And
that's right, you weren't here last meeting. So it did pass in Appleton and a number of other communities. I'm not sure which ones are which. They did forward to us the management plan. There's 3 documents, I believe, and Pam has more or less reviewed them. She has not seen anything alarming in any of them. They plan on having someone here for the November 16th meeting, and we plan to have those things on the agenda that night. If you'd like, we could have them come on the 11th as well if you have questions. No one else at the last meeting had any questions that they felt that they needed someone here at that meeting.
well, it's not like it's a big dollar figure
Exactly.
for us by any stretch, and I was just, you hear it on the news that they're obviously out recruiting cities to participate, because I think it requires all of them.
It does.
To make it happen. And I just haven't heard anything from us as to where we were, but
Were you not here at the other meeting where Appleton was here?
I was here
Okay.
for that one, but that was the last I
Yeah.
heard, and I'm hearing other cities are voting on it, and it hasn't landed at on our agenda yet, so.
You should have been receiving emails from the city of Appleton
I
too?
did, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I've seen those.
that's pretty much all the communication we've had
Oh,
so
okay.
far.
Okay,
So,
but as everybody knows, they're looking for 10% total,
Yes.
and we have a $3,000 anticipated budget, so it's not really earth-shattering to the city of Menasha as far as that
It would
goes.
double because ours is currently 5%, so it would go up to 10%, so that 3,000 could go to 6,000, but it would just be room tax that would go.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
anything else for Peggy then?
So then, okay, so there's just some small budgets. There's a room tax, the post-employment sick leave, that's really just our attempt at saving for when we have retirements happening. We did have a couple last year that you'd see in there. We haven't had any yet this year. We have the dental insurance fund. That is, it's doing very well. We have a small fund balance at this time. I say small, about 35,000. Our program is about 140 per year. We did not raise the rates in the last 2 years. The council already approved the rates for 2016. We already spoke about the IT fund, so then I think probably debt would be the next one. And I think I can show you a picture. It's probably worth more than I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm happy to share this with anyone at any time. This is just, oftentimes the mayor will say to me, how much are we paying off, how much are we taking on, and where are we at as far as our capacity. So I just created this to show a little bit of that. And I know you can't see the whole thing right now, but I will. I just want you to be able to see those numbers. A lot of the big numbers you're seeing in 2014 and 2015, those are refinancings where we were taking on the same amount we were paying off and then paying off our normal share, which was more. I think this side of the chart is probably a little bit more important. Changes from previous year, you'll see starting in 2012 all the way through 2018, our projection is that we're going to be paying off a substantial amount more than we're taking on. That's very important. And then this is another thing that's really important is our debt, where we're at as far as our percentage of debt used. We can borrow 5% of our equalized value. So whatever the value of the city is, they say you can go out and borrow against that up to 5%. The debt limit that you see, that's the amount that we can borrow. You can see our balance, and then you can see how our percentage is going. Obviously, everyone knows why we were at 84 and 85%, but the fact that at the end of 2015, we'll be at 67.91%, I think says a lot about the financial responsibility that the city has taken on and monitored debt and all the financial spending in the last 5 to 7 years. So I think that's a really good number. I'm not sure if you would have told somebody in 2009 that we would be there this year, that you could have believed them, but our goal is still under 60%. Questions on debt?
Alderman Benner, please.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment about the fact that exactly what you said, in 2009 things were looking pretty scary, and between the mayor and the city staff we've been able to maintain almost a 0% increase on a regular basis on our taxes. We continue to do positive things in the city, and we pay off our debt, and you continue to find good ways of refinancing some of the more expensive debt that we did have and save a lot of interest dollars, and I think the city is doing very, very well as far as how we've been rebounding from the situation that we were in. 8 years ago. It's looking pretty good, and between, for all the city staff and the mayor, it's like, you guys are really doing a good job. Thank you.
Alderman Spencer?
Just kind of taking on to Alderman Benner's comments, we're seeing some very nice progress here, and it's with, I'm sure, with a lot of hard work. I don't think this message is getting out to the community. I had a voicemail on my phone this afternoon. A lady from my district was very upset about the level of debt of the community, and I think that Post-Crescent, the article in Post-Crescent did a good job of kind of telling the good news story. But I think as we move forward, probably as a council, we should be mindful of its. I think it's part of our responsibility to get the good news out to the residents of the community.
Peggy, I don't know if you've looked at this, and I didn't ask you, so I'll put you on the spot. Did you look at some of our neighbors or some of the others in the state and where they're at their percentages as well? I know that there were a few that were up in the 80s for a while as well.
Well, I happened to watch it. The last couple communities.
You don't have to name communities themselves.
I think the communities that are doing very well are under 60%. I think you're going to find a number of communities between that 60 and 72 to 74%, not in financial distress, but just at those levels. What happened was over the late 90s and the early 2000s, deferred maintenance was the big thing. Levy limits came into play, and it was, you had to stay within a certain set of numbers, and we just pushed off. We pushed off capital equipment, and we pushed off maintenance. And I think over the last number of years, communities have been trying to, mid-2000s, the levy limits gave some respite to the, if you're borrowing money under levy limits right now, you can borrow as much as you want, but you can't, so you can tax as much as you want for borrowing, but you can't tax for operations. I'm not sure that makes a ton of sense, but the rules are what the rules are, and so what communities have done is they've taken advantage of that, and they've seen their debt capacity shrink because they're using more of it. So I think the fact that we're on a downward trend is probably good. I'd say we're probably middle of the road to a little high still, but we're doing pretty well.
So any other questions for Director Stina? I guess we have one more night left. We'll go through some of the CIP items.
Yeah, I didn't talk about revenues at all. Yeah, so I don't know. Revenues start on page 244. General fund is 244 to 246, and then it's all the special funds. Revenues are pretty stable. If you look at 2014 actual to 2015 budget to 2015 estimate for general fund, I'm talking about on page 246, you're within a few thousand on 16 million. So it's very stable. We do have 2016 budget is a little higher. We do have a little bit of borrowing in that general fund amount, 75,000, and then we have a bit of an increase on our tax levy, not necessarily our tax rate, because we did pick up a fair amount of value. Right now we don't have assessed rates, which will be our tax rates, but we do have our equalized rates. That's on the bottom of the in the executive summary, the bottom of the summary page, and you can see that that's actually lower than it has been in the last couple of years. So
do you want to comment on a few of the bigger numbers, the shared revenue, the road aids, the municipal services, maybe the mobile home and cable TV, some of the things that are kind of big?
Yep. I did run through and just do a bit of an analysis. I can just mention a few.
And I guess not even so much of an analysis of it, but just explain what some of the major revenues are that are coming in.
A fair amount of our revenues obviously are from state aid. If you look starting at 432.01 down to 432.16, 432 happens to be our state aid account number, so you can see that we have well over 4 million just in that category alone, which is 25% of our budget. Not really an increase as far as those state aids this year. In fact, it's a bit of a decrease. although we are expecting in future years our road aid to go up a little bit because we are now spending more money on roads the last couple of years. We did close out TID number 1. TID number 1 had a payable to the general fund for about $82,000, so that goes to zero. There really weren't a lot of big changes. Building inspection revenue is up. That's good. That means community is building again. Those were kind of the major changes. Not a whole lot of change in the cable TV revenue. That's a good revenue though, a couple $100,000, $206,000 projected for 2016. But if you have questions on any of these line items at any time, just let me know what they are, what the details are behind them. The thing about governmental revenues is they really don't change a lot from year to year. It's a pretty stable environment. And when they do change, we all know about it because it's such a big change.
So there's two other fairly large revenues. One's the very last one on page 245 labeled public health, and that is basically the school district pays half of the health department budget for the shared services that we provide back and forth between those two areas. And the next one on the top of page 246 is our library tax, and those are the funds that we get from neighboring communities that use our library but don't have their own library. So if you look at the county tax rate, in the city it's lower than in the townships, and the difference between those two rates comes back to the neighboring libraries that those townships use. Alderman Zielinski, you had a question as well?
Page 246, the bond and note proceeds. Didn't have anything last year, but 216 request is 75,000.
There is, and that 75,000 is for the street lights. The street lights, I believe you saw the analysis a couple months ago. The analysis is actually a net payback in just a couple of years. As far as overall, you'll see spending for it, but then you'll also see reductions in our electricity costs for street lighting.
So that's a proceed?
Well,
Because
this is a
everything
borrowing to
efficiencies?
actually buy the infrastructure, to purchase the infrastructure, and then it'll be paid back basically through decreased expenditures. Yep, utilities.
Okay, I hope the electric rates stay where they are, because
You are in control of that, Dan.
that could dissolve real quick.
So any other questions for Peggy? Did I let you go through all of them now? I think I let you get to the bottom now. Alderman Benner?
Just on that lighting topic, wasn't that about a 2-year payback on that?
2.5 or so,
yeah,
I think.
2.6,
2-ish,
I
yeah.
And most, I don't know, it used to be that a 3-year payback was one that you do. Now I think it's out about 5 years or something that you'll do it if your payback's in 5 years.
So the
or something,
decrease in our cost for the street lighting is about $65,000 a year once it's fully implemented.
Right.
So it should be more or less self-funding with that first payment as we move forward.
Absolutely, that was definitely the right decision to make, and our equipment was ready to be replaced anyways, I think, so I'm pretty sure it was. So,
A little bit over time, we replace
Yeah.
those kind of one at a time.
yeah,
but-
so this was a good deal.
So I did just want to, we're doing some minor CIP, and then also I want to remind you that we'll have all the department heads here on Wednesday, so if you have changes that you'd like to make in any of the budgets, Wednesday would be the most appropriate time, just so that the public would have a chance to weigh in on any of those changes before the Monday night meeting. So anything that you could, we'll still accept motions on Monday night, but I would hope they'd be minor things if they were not changes in policy or programs. If there's nothing else for Peggy, I'd accept a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Broadcasts of the City of Menasha Administration Committee, Board of Public Works, and Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley. Menasha residents and interested parties can obtain information about these meetings and meeting agendas from the city website, www.cityofmenasha-wi.gov. Expression of opinions regarding City of Menasha issues or about these broadcasts can be made by contacting the Mayor's office, 920-967-5117. Contacting their city alderman. Contact information appears on the website. Completing the electronic feedback form on the website. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.